Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow councillors, members of the public, and also RANs, and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. It is a full agenda, as you can see over my little tabs there. It's quite a big agenda, but I've got some notes of times, and I know we'll be running out of time, but I don't really want to extend standing orders for the time. So hopefully people can be concise, if not precise, concise with their questions, and do stick to questions as best they can. And appreciate it's not that sort of strict, but we can get through scrutiny in reasonable time without having questions unanswered. That would be great. So appreciate your help on that. So the first item is apologies, and you've got a couple of apologies, I think, it's time.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Richard Holland and Councillor Sonia Wilcox.
Okay, and can I just add Andy Smith as well, who with the report later on? So, Councillor Andy Smith. I think the next item, lost my agenda, is declarations of interest. Have anybody got any declarations of interest? Well, I can see paddle tennis is going to be really popular. Nobody's got a declaration of interest in paddle tennis. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting, agenda item 3. Are they okay? We've moved those. Some of them move those. Thank you. Agreed. Yeah, I was good by name con on that sort of thing. Next item then. I don't know how it snuck up the agenda, by the way, since the pre-meeting, but leave that aside. It's now item 4, and it's the Lichfield District Youth Council. And I think Christine and Richard presumably are addressing this, are they? I just want to draw members' attention to the recommendations that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee review the activities of the Youth Council. It's only been going for 12 months over this year in operation, and recommend changes or improvements that they can think of. And I think it's quite an important phrase that could be implemented. So if members have any ideas how they think we can actually improve on the work that's been done, that would be good. So I'll let officers introduce, or Richard to introduce the item, but if you keep it brief, as I say, it would be great. I know we've got people who've got some questions ready, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for facilitating this item up the agenda. I had a meeting at 7 o'clock. Subsequently, that meeting's been cancelled over the weekend due to lack of quorum. So I'm here for the duration now. So I do thank you for the accommodation. So before you've had the report before you regarding the Lichfield District Youth Council. This was obviously set up September 2020, following the Cabinet Agreement in September 2022. And in its first year in operation, I feel that it certainly had made useful grounds of achievements in one way and another in terms of the input of young people and having their views expressed. You've got in front of you a paper that will obviously show that those reports, those initial outcomes and so forth have gone forward. So really it is, without going through the report too much, it is there as seen. Quite happy for questions to come forward. I've got Christine, who's been able to help me certainly throughout the process, and Kerry with me on my right. For my part in the play of the situation, I've only attended as an observer rather than involvement, and I have to report to this committee how enthused I have been with the interaction that the youngsters have had. It hasn't always, depending on which month, hasn't always been highly attended, but that doesn't actually take away from the debate of those particular times. Have always been useful, and certainly some of the comments that have been taken I've even raised, if I putting another hat on at County Council at Health and Care, some of the comments that they made regarding to mental health issues have been raised at a County Council. So in a sense, it's taking forward their views into platforms like this and authorities that are making the greater and wider decisions for our district. So open to questions, Chair.
Okay, well, on paragraph 3.2, it refers to all secondary schools in the district were extended invitations, and I know that Councillor Brooker's got a question about that, and then Sue, and then Dave, Councillor Susan Woodward, Councillor after that. So, Claire, please, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I think engagement are absolutely essential. They are the key. It's only been done a year, so we do need to be gentle and we need to grow this. So my question, engagement with secondary schools.
I think you need your microphone on, Claire. Sorry.
It was on. Sorry, I'm back on now. Engagement with secondary schools. Can you tell us which secondary schools specifically? And then I've got a sort of a supplementary after that. If you can tell us that first, thanks.
As far as I'm concerned, every school within our district have the opportunity to apply. So within that list, obviously, that would, if we were looking at Lichfield, that itself was King Edward's, the Friary, Netherstowe, and Queen's Croft. We also had in Burntwood, we invited Chase Terrace Academy and the Darwin Academy, and also invites went to, if I remember correctly, to Rawlett School at Tamworth, which is effectively within our district. So we tried to cover, and the Cathedral School in Lichfield as well, of which those schools, the Cathedral School, King Edward's, the Croft, not the Croft, Queen's, I think of something else then. Primary school in my village is the Croft. Queen's and Erasmus Darwin and Chase Terrace took the invite up, and Cathedral School took their invite.
Thank you for that. And thank you for saying the Rawlett, because you're right, it is still in our district, even though a lot of the children come from Tamworth, a lot of them also come from our district. So my second half is kind of a recommendation. Having two children myself who are in high school and asking their opinion and knowing how hard it can be to engage with them, it's that continual engagement. Would there be something for you to look at in the future of engaging early, not necessarily for the council, but engaging early with primary schools, such as year 6? Because I know where my children were in primary school, they were a lot more engaged in youth councils and green councils. And as they get to year 6, come along and have a look in the cabinet, come along and have a look at this. And when you get to senior school, go and join the youth council. And so engaging with them earlier while they're still in primary school. So by the time they get to secondary school, they're expecting it, and that continuous engagement. So if we're only going to engage when they're already teenagers, we've kind of lost them. So my appeal and my recommendation is perhaps considering the primary school in year 6 and keep showing them how good it can be to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I think that is absolutely sound in something that we can look into for sure. I think what you're saying is not unreasonable. How we approach it is then we've got to look at what we can do. Maybe that we invite them to attend to see the process and so forth. So obviously that's the makeup of the youth council is really for the youth council to make those decisions, and the guidance is coming from officers. And as I say, my part in it has not really been, I've been there to observe, if necessary, answer questions that they may feel, but it's not to direct.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Kerry, so
Sorry,
Do
I
you
was
want
just going to add to that as well, and I think you referenced it, Claire, in your opening to the question. Let's say it's been in operation for 12 months now. I think we've got some good learning, worked out what works well, what not, and the youth councillors themselves have done some reflections as well, which is really great. And I think there's an opportunity there to also work with the youth council to get them to go out and do some of that promotion work with our primary schools as well. So not just the council doing it, but how we kind of support and empower the youth council themselves to go out and have that type of engagement with the primary school age children as well.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. I suppose certainly support that. I got Sue Woodward next, Dave Robson next, and then two more after that. So
Thanks. Just to reference the Constitution and pick up what Councillor Cox has just said, the Constitution refers not just to secondary schools, but also to colleges, to children who are being homeschooled, and there's been no visibility for those children who are not in secondary schools. So, that's something that happened before the Youth Council actually met. So it's naive, if I may say so, to say everything that the Youth Council does is down to what the Youth Council decide. The Constitution was one that was given to the Youth Council. So please let's patronise those young people by suggesting otherwise. I just wanted to ask a very simple question though. In view of the fact that there have been 11 meetings, 7 members at the last meeting, a tenth of the budget only spent, how successful in a range of 1 to 10 does the cabinet member think the Youth Council has been so far?
Well, I'm not too sure I was patronising Councillor Woodward. If I felt that I was, then I will apologise, but I didn't think there was any patronising young people. I was saying that I valued what I was hearing. That is not patronising, that's taking on board what they were saying. With regards to obviously your question in terms of home parenting, that also had that from the parents that we were aware of, that invitation also had gone out too. So my apologies that I did not include that. Value out of 1 and 10, without sounding patronising, to me, because I've been enthused what I'm hearing, I'm going to give it a good 7, but I would think there's still work to be done. And I wasn't at the last meeting, but what I understand with the new chair of the Youth Council is that they've decided to move away from monthly meetings to work to quarterly meetings. And from that would also encourage that some working groups. So I think the value of it will certainly start coming in the future rather than just the first year, which obviously is, for young people, that they are during that time coming to the Youth Council, learning the processes and learning their feet. And I don't see anything wrong, but I do apologise if I've sounded patronising. That's no way was it intended.
okay, thank you.
Chair, if I can just come back on that, I think the point I was trying to make was that the Constitution was set up before the young people actually met. So it's patronising of the organisation, if you like to say, everything's in the hands of the Youth Council, when clearly the Constitution isn't. That was fixed beforehand. So, I'm not sure whether the Youth Council themselves have reviewed the Constitution, whether they've looked at things, whether college students are invited, whether those who have gone out of school to do apprenticeships or BTECs elsewhere, whether they've been invited. On the one hand, you can't say it's all in the hands of the Youth Council, but not give them the tools in order to facilitate them making sure that the Constitution is adhered to. So that was where it's sort of patronising of us as an organisation to say, over to you, young people, but still have a constitution that they're supposed to adhere to. So I'm sorry if Councillor Cox thought I was being sort of personally attacking him, but, we as an organisation, we've got to decide either, the Youth Council is part of what the council does, or we hand it all over. We can't have it both ways.
Well, certainly in terms of the constitution, I think it was one of the first things that they went through and adopted themselves. Whether they and again this
It was
Yeah.
written and drafted for them, though.
Yeah, you're not the
It was written and drafted
you
for
mark
them,
it-
I presume.
yes, it was written and drafted prior to the meeting. The guidance that was given to by the officers. And I'm not in any way putting the officers under the pushing them under the bus. The effective on the if we look at the cabinet role, it's a political position, and what I didn't really want at all was for the youth council to have a political accent to it. In any way, I wanted it to be apolitical for them to make those work for themselves to go forward, and obviously the guidance was given to them how to go about it.
Yeah, can I see we're not party political, which is I understand, but I'm also guessing that the constitution was based on other constitutions from other councils. I don't, somebody out there's a council out there that thinks of all these things, and all those other councils keep adopting them. Yeah, but there must be somebody out there who starts these things off. But that's why I assume you're nodding there, so that's useful. I've got Councillor Robertson next, and then Councillor Miles, then Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I've got, I think, 3 questions on this, plus any
Well,
follow-ups.
6 already.
Come
but
on,
please be-
I'll
yeah.
be quick, Steve. So the first one relates to, again, those invitations to schools. I note that we haven't made an invitation to South Staffordshire College or Maplehurst Dyslexia School or the Bridge, which are 3 certainly 2 11 to 16 providers and 1 16 to 18 provider which operate in the district. And on top of that, I'd like to ask, if we are going to miss 3 providers that are in our district, I'm going to go back to the previous time this came to overview and scrutiny before it was introduced, where I sat at this table and offered my expertise as somebody who works in education. I then followed that up with an email to you to say, can we put our heads together to talk about this and set this up in a particular way? An email which today remains unanswered. So how have we gone wrong in that we've missed 3 providers?
I will check on the
I mean, can I just help? Will you be doing that now? Yeah, I mean,
I will check on the list and provide a detailed list of who was invited and who took the invitations up. I will say that there was always, and I still believe we will be taking up the further invitation to expand on it, to re-invite those organisations. We can't bring them to the table or make them. It is their choice.
thank you. You got 2 other questions, you say, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the next one it links into the question that Councillor Booker asked about the Rawlet. Obviously, the Rawlet serves a significant part of the district, particularly around Meath Valley and parts of Whittington and Street Hay, but it's not the only rural area of the district which doesn't. Where the area isn't included in the Lichfield or Burntwood school planning districts. So we've got Paisley, all of it. We've got parts of Bourne Vale and Drake Bassett and Canwell, Hopwas, Comberford, Wigington. Oh, sorry, no, Wigington. We've got significant other areas that are to the south and west of Tamworth, which are unlikely to be sending their pupils to the Rawlet. So what work have we done? And I suspect we're not quite there yet, but one of the recommendations that I think we do need to look at is how those pupils from that end of the district, the very south of the district, are going to be able to access this, because they're unlikely to be going to Lichfield district schools. They're unlikely to be going to the Rawlet on the other side of Tamworth. And there's a significant number of young people there who are potentially missing out. Similarly with Alrywas, which falls into the Burton school planning district. Similarly to the very north part of Meath Valley, which falls into the Burton school planning district, and your own ward of Armitage or Handsacre, which, with the exception of Kings Bromley, entirely falls within the Rugeley school planning district. Again, this is a point that I made previously before it was introduced. It again could have been dealt with by that email that I sent to you, and it remains unanswered to this day. That we are missing out and we are excluding young people from this process because we haven't thought through as an organisation how to do it.
You've got the point. So what about all these other places? I mean, you're going to write to all the schools outside of the district as well, or what? I mean, how do you do this?
It's a good question. And to review it with exactly what we'll do from this meeting. We will take those comments on board. As for not contacting the member as he did, I do recall that he did have that email. I do now recall it. I have oversighted it, but I do recall that I did receive that email, and I will certainly will have that discussion.
Okay, thanks. And the third question you got, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to 3.3 in the document pack about LDYC as a consultative body. I've just got some questions about how that consultation happens and what steps we're taking to make sure that it's genuinely meaningful consultation. I know not with the current cabinet member, with another cabinet member, I've had some difficulty in the last year about consultation being meaningful and things coming forward ahead of time enough to be able to impact the decision. So can you confirm that these things go out to the Youth Council with enough time for them to be able to have their input and have their say ahead of decisions being made? And then just to back that up, in the appendix, it talks about the Youth Council have asked for more community events, better public transport, more green communities, eco-friendly options in housing, recycling stickers in schools, increase recycling bin availability in schools. Can we point to anything where LDYC have said any of the things on that list, plus other things that they will have said in previous meetings that we've already implemented? Because particularly if I'm a young
We've got the
person,
question. Can we, you know?
I'm going to ask Christine to just cover the detail on that.
So kind of the process we're bringing in, and it is with big help of leadership teams. So when reports are first kind of formulated, it's at that point that the authors are encouraged to go to Youth Council. So Kerry did with 2050 strategy, Anthony behind did with the budget consultation. So it's long before, and we are still pushing from a governance point of view, and it should be appearing now and things like that actually in your consultation in the report. So even before it gets to this stage, it should be going to Youth Council first. Then their views will come in here, so it can be fed into you, then into Cabinet, etc. So there was a lot of feedback with 2050, so it may already be incorporated. There were views that was given to Councillor Strachan as that cabinet member for the budget consultation about spends of money, obviously, that would affect them. So that's kind of the consultation process that we're going through. Sorry, it's coming.
Yeah. I was just add to what Chris has just kind of walked through. As Chris has said, I took and led a session with them on the Lichfield District 2050 strategy, and I also was involved in the website as well. And I can absolutely kind of reassure you, Councillor Robertson, from an officer perspective, we are absolutely committed to it being meaningful consultation. And also, you know, no leading questions, having a bit of a blank sheet of paper with our young people as well, and tell us where this doesn't work for you, tell us where it does, tell us what some of those practical steps as well as some of the strategic elements as well. So as officers, we are absolutely committed to using the Youth Council as a kind of positive consult. That word.
Yeah.
That one.
The questions I got, in fact, was about if there's more transparency. I'm not saying it's hidden, but more transparency when the young people have given their views and actually include in the reports or refer to in the reports, and also the publicity that's required. I know that's addressed. That's to say they want to do more publicity themselves now. But those are the sort of things that we can see that we are listening. They do exist. We are listening, and they're included in the report. Just more transparency. But briefly, if you come back briefly, just if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of recommendation, I note that we've had this situation where attendance seems to be kind of dwindling. I think one of the things we can do to help drive that is make sure that as a part of Youth Council, when they've said something and we have that feedback into them, so we can really press into that. It will support people in making sure that they're spending their time appropriately.
Okay, thanks. Miles Trent, Councillor Trent was next.
Thank you, Chair. My take on this is it's an excellent initiative, but as others have said, it's about how we ensure it survives and thrives. And also, I think Councillor Robertson makes an excellent point about ensuring it's meaningful contribution and is never just sort of tokenistic. I had a point about refreshing the communications. So I think it's great to hear that we've gone out to schools and districts and obviously want to plug any gaps that there are and ones that haven't been invited. But even those that haven't taken it up, is there scope to perhaps annually go out to schools again? Because obviously their staff changes on a yearly basis or even more frequently. So just to refresh it regularly to make sure we're capturing all the schools that want to be involved. And my other point was whether there's any scope for youth councillors speaking at district council events. It might be something you're looking into already, but more, I understand that people from district council have been at youth council meetings, but is there scope for reciprocal arrangements? And that would only, I think, increase interest in local government. I think they were my points. Thank you.
Okay. You want to come back on that and then if you get an agreement, do you want to come back on that?
I think the point on constant communication is really key, isn't it? At the last meeting, youth councillors themselves have appointed a social media coordinator as well. So again, they as a youth council wanting to take some ownership and responsibility around communication. And absolutely, I do think we need an ongoing cycle of communications with schools and other providers to both shout out and illustrate the difference the youth council is making and also kind of promote them to join it as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think that is something that we are going to definitely build on and do more of this year.
And if I could just add, Councillor Trent, that certainly has already been advised, we will be writing to all schools within our district, and I will have the conversation with Councillor Robertson with how we may be able to reach for those that are at schools that are not within our district, but pupils are. So, which is, I appreciate what you're saying. It's a big ask because you then have got to privately trying to work out who you're going to, and it was how many representatives from each school was in the initial. It's 5 representatives. So obviously it's a question of does it become council or does it become parliament because of the numbers.
Are there limits on how many schools or how many councillors?
No, there wasn't as such, but obviously as 5 from per school, if you've got 5 from attending from each, if we're not careful without trying to exclude, and we'd have to try and manage it, how we're going to do it, is that, as I say, I use the expression from council to parliament, because before long you have a large number, but we have got to get it. Yes, I appreciate that, Councillor Woodward. But nevertheless, we will we'll look into that for sure.
And
which was what our intention was from the beginning.
Now, on your point, sorry, around kind of inviting them to kind of district council meetings, we did actually extend an invite to the chair and vice chair to come along this evening as well. Fortunately, it's Easter holidays, so yeah. But absolutely right. There's so many opportunities, and yeah, we are exploring those as well.
Can you pass on my request? It's an open invitation. If they at least give us some notice, so we can make sure it's on the agenda. If they wanted to address us for a few minutes, that would be fine. We'll point out there'll be some that'll go into Eton and to Marlborough and that from this area. So make sure you cover the whole of the country in when you're actually contacting people. I've got Councillor Leona Leong and then Colin Ball, and then that's definitely it.
Thank you. It's always a delight to have more people involved in, having a say of what they want to see for the districts. I want to ask about the budget. So we've got a budget which increases by 10k every year, but I know that members, they are there for 1 year. They may change due to area or schools and location wise. So is that budget, is that too much? Would it be because, what was spent currently, or are there predicted projects which need about 20 to 30k in the following 2 years? And my other question is about the Fun Hub Club. Again, really good ideas there. But the one that we've given in the appendix, for example, if it's for 16 people, can we do can you have activities which maybe involve more? Because there's so many youth in the area, for example, like hundreds or thousands, which can get involved. I think something which can contribute to whether it's job skills or education wise, I think that's more meaningful. Again, swimming, ice skating, that's really meaningful as well. But if it contributes to long-term skills, I think that's a really good idea. Thank you.
I think you make some valid points there for sure. I think there's something, again, we will look into how we can formulate the agenda that would involve that exact process of various projects. With regards to your question, in a sense, was it too much? I think if we look at it as a fluctuating budget, 10,000 for the first year, 20,000 for the second year, 30,000 for the third, would probably indicate the expansion of their remit of how they're going to resolve themselves. So the early days, as I said earlier, it's about finding their feet, finding their remit. There will obviously be a change in personnel, because obviously, those ones that are 17 may be leaving school. Those that are 15, 16 may also choose to leave school. So obviously we will have to recognise there's going to be a natural churn and a natural direction that will be probably sent in a different direction by a new cohort. But if we've got the basis of it down, then the new cohort will be able to pick that up and run with it, as well as obviously coming up with their own ideas.
You can make it really complicated and say it doesn't have to be a member of a school to be a member of the youth council, but good luck with sorting that one out.
I just add a question really quickly.
Oh, beg your pardon.
Sorry. I was just thinking, how about if the budget members, or if it's different membership every single year, if they request, instead of having it the same, because if it's different members, if it's the same budget each year, because due to different people, different schools joining, coming in and out, we're looking at more schools coming in, can't they request to increase budget instead of just giving them 20k, 30k? Just as an idea, really.
I think the answer to that would be within the MTFS.
Yeah, Anton just fainted at the back. Councillor Colin Ball, please.
Yes, Chair. I'd assumed the reason this was early on the agenda is because young people were going to be here. And I'm grateful for Kerry saying they were invited, but not able to attend, and your suggestion, Chair, that they should come in future, because I'd be quite keen to understand from them what's worked well and what hasn't worked well as part of that learning process. And hopefully we'll have the chance to do that at some point.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Colin. Right, thank you. I mean, we'll give you some feedback there, I think, and I know there's a lot of complicated, not questions, but answers to deal with insofar as the logistics are concerned. But hopefully, if you can have a report back at some point in the future, we'll work that out the best way. That would be good. So I'm grateful for everybody's involvement, young Christine Lewis and young Kerry and Richard Cox, those sort of people. So thank you for that. I'd like to move on now to agenda item 5, which is health matters. Now, bit like our work program, it suddenly comes to a standstill, really. But I know there are a lot of issues that have been ready for the next year or so. I'm going to read them all out, but they're available. But I'd invite the Vice Chair if she wants to say anything on this, even though I didn't say I'll do that, but I'm doing it now. Is that okay?
Yeah, shall I go through the last item first in March?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I'll start with what members have raised in was about the Samuel Johnson midwife maternity unit. I know that it's been asked, what's going on with those. So I have chased them again, as they probably know, I always chase them on that. We're looking, the officer has informed me, hopefully there will be an update in the summer where this item will be bringing, will be in discussion again in the summertime. So hopefully, we have some updates for that. I've also really kindly, the new cabinet member for health and care, Mike Wilcox, he has also kindly chased updates. So hopefully we'll get a response from that later on as well. So thanks, Mike, for that. So the item which was discussed was about carers. It was a review of draft of all age carer strategy between 2024 to 2029, which should be commencing this month. And we know unpaid carer, it's not an easy task, but it's really meaningful as well. So we're talking about unpaid carers from the age of 5, so young carers, parent carers, and also elderly carers, about their life outside caring, what support do they need, their physical and and mental well-being as well, recognizing the value of the work as well. It's not easy task at all, because most of us may become a carer later or have been as well. So it was discussion about how do we make it easy for them? Can children be children rather than just caring? And what happens if the carer is not there anymore? So actions which was discussed was, for example, like finance management, how to prevent these unpaid carers to be lonely, signpost information to them effectively. And, if they want to speak to someone straight away, how can I actually speak to someone who is, when they need them as well? So recommendations, what we're looking at is, speaking to identifying carers at early stage rather than later on, for example, in primary care surgeries or schools, and also those from non-white communities, because it was found like 97% of carers were from white communities. So they're still trying to identify those which are non-white, because sometimes people don't think the carers, you just go straight into it as well. But again, what we've mentioned before about preventative is, how do we age healthy and have good mental health as well, and how to be independent early on. I think that's really important as well. So these items were discussed and will be measured, so that those items were basically taken on to Cabinet during the last meeting as well. The other item was discussed was adult social care enhanced assurance working group reports, which was quite a lengthy report. So I'll just summarize it as well for that one. Again, that report was to present to be Cabinet as well, because we know that Staffordshire, it is an older demographic. And, again, encouraging good health, well-being, independent, and, preventative measures, which was discussed. That's really important as well. There's a series of workshops held because the CQC asked for feedback from the council's assessment in terms of these items, and the recommendations which were given was like reviewing finance assessment process, how to avoid backlogs, and, review advice and the information given for adult social care, how do you support those, make sure there's quality translation for those which are non-English speaking as their first language, inviting other partners along, such as fire and ambulance as well, raising safeguarding issues, whistleblowing, and reports being shared to districts and boroughs as well. So those were the March items as well. But I just want to ask, I just want to actually mention,
Not me.
no, not ask, I just want to mention, sorry, I think as district councillors, I think there's so much that we can do to promote healthy living ourselves as well. In Lichfield district, we've got parks, there's activities which don't cost, or there's community centres which have got great community groups which help each other out. And I think, our residents, if they could use those, I think that would be really good if we can promote healthy living in district to make sure our area is living healthy and aging healthy as well. I just want to end up with one.
Just be clear on that last item. Was that meant to make us all feel guilty? Or
No. I'm
to
just saying
give
that.
us
No. It's just basically that.
I do feel guilty, but I just wondered if that was just me.
It's just if from looking at this, that how can we prevent? How can we live?
Yeah, don't leave the
longer,
house.
healthier
Is
than-
my advice.
Don't leave the house. I'm not sure about that. And then my last item is basically I've been invited to attend the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is looking at adult social care and children's services as well. So if there are any items which members want to raise, please contact me as you have done in the past as well for health and care ONS.
That's great. Thank you very much. Oh, wait.
Thank you.
I'll give it down the line. It's Colin, Sue, and then Claire, then Dave. Well, all that row.
Yeah, Chair, at the overview and scrutiny training recently that Councillor Young arrived late at, so she didn't hear me say this then, so I'll repeat it now for her benefit, and I hope it doesn't embarrass her. I've been on this committee for 5 years now, through different terms, and you have been the best person doing this role that we've had in that 5-year term. And you've always come back to us with clear answers and explanation of what's been going on, and you'd follow stuff up, because previous people in your role have not done that, and it's very heartening to see that. Thank you very much.
That's it. Well, there's not really a question, except unless it says, do you agree at the end, but I wouldn't do that. Sue.
Yeah, well, I agree with Councillor Bull. I just wanted to pick up an issue that came up at the last meeting. So on page 3 of the minutes, it says that members said they look forward to the promise of more localised data that was made at the
Yes.
County Council's committee. What sort of progress is being made on that? Have you been updated as to where we are on locality data? And the second little bit of that is we also suggested a health priorities task group or locally for Lichfield districts, and what progress has been made with that? That's a question to the chair rather than to the vice chair.
And localized data. So the last meeting, I remember they did say they would share out, but there hasn't been any updates at all. But of course, I'll chase that later on once I've got that as well. But usually, as you know from the work program, it's usually not that quick. They wouldn't give us about 2 or 3 months time. So I will chase it for you.
I do know because I did a few exchange of emails with the officers at the county. When the committee next considers the West Midlands ambulance service, it will include performance data, including ambulance response time. So that's coming up. I also, by the way, asked them about Wallis Quarry because it used to annoy me that they looked at Wallis Quarry. Why Wallis Quarry? And the reason was that it affects more than one district council. So did Burwood Health and Wellbeing Centre because it affects Cannock Chase, but that was never accepted as an item for discussion or investigation. So Claire, next please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leona. I completely agree with you about the promoting in our residents a healthy lifestyle, and it kind of leads to my question, which you may not be able to answer, but you may be able to take back, is the so what? How are we incorporating everything that we're learning back here, building it into our future plans? And that might be something we talk later, item 9. But how are we bringing all this information that we are collecting, making use of and discussing, and how are we putting it back into the districts that we represent and therefore making our residents more healthy? Thanks.
It's a very big question. So again, I think that comes out in the 2050, because I've had a good read of that, and I was really positive about that because I think that's something that we really need to do to promote it and for residents, and I think everyone to recognise how important it is to stay healthy because it makes a person more positive as well. So I think item later on, I think that would be great to have some clarity on that.
Okay, thanks. You're asking a question is going to prompt another question. Dave, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully a quick one. Really glad to see that young carers were discussed as part of the carers discussion that you had. I think between these papers coming out and tonight. Can I just ask in there, was there any discussion that was had about the educational attainment of young carers?
No, it wasn't.
Could I ask, when you get a chance, can you pass on an email address for somebody I can get in touch with at the county? Because that's a that's a big hole that I think needs to be filled, and they're clearly missing it.
I can ask on that.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Dave. Okay. Right.
Can I remind you, please, that you didn't answer my
No, but I
question.
can't remember what it was. What was it?
It was what progress has been made towards setting up a health priority
Oh, beg your pardon.
task group.
Can I refer to that when you come to the work programme, which is where it should be raised, actually, Susan, but I won't complain about you raising it in the wrong place. Item 6 is task groups, but not part of the work programme. So the first one is a Lichfield City Centre master plan. I just wanted to say anything on that. We've got the report. I don't want another report, but if you've got any issues you wanted to draw attention to there, Colin, or
So sorry, Chair. The first one on my agenda was pedestrianisation, but I will speak now.
The numbers are all over the place.
Yeah.
Now.
Okay. Yeah. We had a meeting on the 8th of February.
Yes,
the notes are before you, which was followed up by another meeting on the 20th of March, which Will hasn't been able to produce the notes for yet because
graceful.
There's a very tight timescale.
Oh, yeah.
And fortunately, we had Andy Smith at that one cabinet member, and we had a very robust discussion, I think, about the plans for the site. But an inconsequential one. It didn't reach any conclusions. And I'm very concerned because at the end of that meeting, I went round the members present and asked them how they thought we're performing on a score of 0 to 5. And 2 of them gave me a score of 4, and 3 a score of 2. So not very satisfactory. I've been reflecting on that since, and I've shared some ideas how we might improve it. But one of the biggest things I want to be doing now is having a task group in May, which will look in detail at the site overall. I've been in communication with the leader and the cabinet members' responsibility. I've liaised with Will, and we're aiming to have a meeting in May sometime or early June, which is a long time away, but I think it's worth waiting to get the relevant people there so that we can actually tie down what is going to happen on the site overall, when's it going to happen, what the cost implications of it, because I'm increasingly concerned that this is developing in a kind of piecemeal fashion and a not ad hoc fashion. And as issues arise, are being dealt with, but we don't have an overview. There was an overview a few years ago, but we seem to have drifted away from that. And I think it's important that we come back to that again. And that's something that I'm keen to do. And it may be at that point that the task group sits in abeyance for a while, because once we set out that plan and program, we've an agreed way forward. I think it's for the implementation for that to go forward, unless there's significant changes, in which case the task group could be brought back together again. And there was a city centre master plan task group. It's become the Birmingham roadside task group, because that's what we're focusing on at the moment. And I think in perhaps a year, 18 months' time, we need to be looking at the whole of the city centre master plan again and scoping out what we do and talking about the future plans. Because for me, the role of the task group is about shaping the policy and the approach, testing it, questioning it before decisions are made, rather than simply rubber stamping detailed aspects of it as we go through. And that's what I want us to get to at that point, some point in May and going forward. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Why is the long stay car park further away from the city centre than the short stay car park? But don't worry, that's for others in the audience, really. Councillor Dave Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Hopefully, I'm sure Councillor Ball's aware of my views on this, but just for the avoidance of any doubt and to pop it into the minutes so it's recorded. The meanwhile use for the multi-storey car park. I know I've been saying since May last year that represents a real opportunity to increase the amount of blue badge disabled parking which is available in the city centre, and it would be a real missed opportunity if that wasn't discussed as part of the meanwhile use for the multi-storey car park when it's demolished. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Chair, answer that. That's already been raised in a task group meeting some months ago and hopefully been recorded and being taken note of and acted on. But I've not had any communication on that yet, so I'll now follow that up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Paul Ray, Councillor Paul Ray.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up because I'm on the task group that Colin chairs for the master plan, and I agree with the point he's making, because in the last council, we did have a presentation to the task group from the project manager and from the architect, and it was exciting and the vision was laid out. And I think as Colin says, I agree with what you're saying, that has got lost. And I think the task group needs to have that so that we can see what the overall vision is. The role of the task group, as Colin says, isn't to get into the detail and project manage it, but to understand what their vision is and to scrutinise and advise on their vision.
Did you give him a 2 or a 4?
He wasn't there.
Could have voted, but no. Okay, thank you. Oh, yes. Susan.
Thanks. If I could just make a general comment. None of the members of that city centre task group are from Burntwood, and only one is from the rural area outside of Lichfield City. Yet things that are going to come forward to your task group, Colin, are going to have implications for the whole district rather than just the city centre. So it's a request, please. When you're considering whether it's capital receipt or expenditure on that Birmingham road site, please consider the whole of the district rather than just the city centre, because whatever happens there has implications across the whole district.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I didn't decide who was on the task group. I was given those members. I did make the point strongly that I wanted more women on the task group because we hadn't had them in the past, and that's been accommodated. But perhaps when we look at the composition of task groups and committees going forward, we might consider having a member from Burntwood on there who may well be a woman.
Well, if you're going to abeyance, then there's another chance there. Okay, Phil, please. So Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you. Just like to echo what Colin was saying there. The the scoring system that you sprung upon us, I was scoring that on the progress of
Out
that
of 10.
meeting. On the progress of the meeting, because in previous meetings we have got a little bit bogged down in social housing on that particular corner, and I think that's been to the detriment of the group moving forward. So I think we need to find a way going forward where there is a sticking point of some description, that we don't keep revisiting that. We find a way to solve it so we can get on to the bigger issues rather than keep revisiting the same thing. Thank you.
Agreed, and hopefully my new process will resolve that, as you've already indicated it should do.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. I'll move on to the next one then, which is the one I chair with the pedestrian task group, which is to do pedestrianisation, but particularly with regard to the disabled drivers and that, and the problems that they've had, which is there. And I'd like to draw attention to the members, one from Burntwood, one from the city, one from the city, one from Burntwood, and one from the rural areas. So balanced, I would say a balanced there, but I mean, of course, you have to rely on volunteers. If people aren't going to volunteer, then you can't have them on there. But they're the notes there, which was the issues that were raised by the witnesses that we had at the meeting, and then those questions we put to the cabinet member and senior officers at a future date. We're still trying to get sorting out some dates there. So I'm sure that the change to the part-time crazy idea of pedestrianisation was just a coincidence following this task group. It's not even on the agenda because it was just so ridiculous. There's no point in putting it on there. He says politically. Right, no questions. Yes, Councillor Ray, Paul Ray.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've debated a lot about pedestrianisation, and the purpose. I didn't want to raise a point of getting back into the detail of it, but I think there are some learning points about what's happened with pedestrianisation and its implementation, which I think the council should take away in its whole about how we can improve things with further projects and implementation. One is communication to the public, and in this case blue badge holders or other parts of the communities, selling the positive opportunities that pedestrianisation can bring, and at the same time respecting the interests of certain groups in our population. And the other one is, with that implementation, keeping it simple, because I think on hindsight that hybrid scheme wasn't going to work, and it created a lot of confusion with the public and visitors to the city. So, and maybe if it had come back to ONS before it was implemented, that might have been that might have been something that was raised and could have been learnt from. So I think just as some learning points going forward, I'd make those 2 points.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. I'll send you next. Dave, Councillor.
I mean, it pains me to do it, but I agree with Councillor Ray. I of course jest. I was expecting more of a chuckle from that one. Apologies. Okay, I got there in the end. I'll take it. No, I think one of the things that comes out of this is in the papers. It actually says that pretty much everybody's in favour of pedestrianisation, but there's a massive problem around the provision of parking. And I completely agree with Councillor Ray that the consultation that was undertaken around this was inadequate, and I think everybody would agree with that. And I've got significant concerns about how any consultation that's taken place since it was introduced, whether it has been properly meaningful consultation. And one of the things I'd like to ask you, if I may, Chair, are you aware if the cabinet member was aware of the notes of this meeting, or had picked up the notes of this meeting when they made the decision to vary the pedestrianisation scheme not long after this? Now, I don't actually know when the changes were suggested to Staffordshire.
Well, all I can say is if the councillor of any more than a year's standing will know that if someone from member of the electorate says to you, "Thank you for doing this or that," you actually haven't done it. You never actually say, "I didn't do it, but thank you." You just say, "Oh, thank you, thank you." So you're not actually, so I'm not going to find out, because as far as I'm concerned, we'll take the credit. So I'm not going to answer that one, but meaningful, I made a note for the communication. So I'd like to move on to agenda item 7, which is you've got a special billing here for the civic matrix there. I don't really want to say a few words on this before, because I've got 7 o'clock down as my deadline for this item. to keep ahead of schedule. But if you've got anything to say,
I will try and keep it under 6 minutes for you, Chair, and I will comfortably.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased actually that this will be the first task and finish group of the overview and scrutiny that meets up to the second part of the task and finish group. We've met once, we've come up with recommendations. I'm hoping that the committee tonight will endorse those and we can pass them to Cabinet to have this looked at. It was a very full discussion actually from members who were there. It lasted a little bit longer than I originally was planning on. He looks at Willie smiling at me. But no, we went into as much detail as we possibly could to look at a process which wasn't previously working, and hopefully have come up with a much more streamlined, much reduced, much simpler to understand process for deciding what goes on with these invitations for the chair. We've also made some other recommendations around have a button on the website to ask if you'd like to invite the chair here. And then if for any reason it doesn't come up, then we can automatically send somebody an email saying, actually, well, here's your ward councillors, here's your parish chair. So that people have got the opportunity to invite other people if they just want somebody with some elected kind of clout there. I think it's a decent set of recommendations. I'm not entirely certain anybody walked out of there going, that's absolutely brilliant. It's the most amazing thing ever. But I think we've done a good job of hopefully streamlining some stuff, getting rid of some items which really didn't need to be in there. I'm not entirely certain why we'd want to be checking in with the chief exec or the leader about whether the chair can go to a do. So there's a variety of things that we've changed around that with a very specific aim, not to try and have a discussion about the value of the civic role as a whole, to very much look at the internal processes. And that's why, again, I wanted to make sure that we'd attached the comments that we'd received from previous chairs, some of which were very much focused at the value of the civic role and wanting to do more and things like that, which is very specifically not the task that we've been given. So we've incorporated what we can. There were some of the points that they wanted to raise with us, which we weren't able to incorporate. Those which we could, I think the task group very much did. And I'm hoping that members will agree it's a pretty decent set of proposals to pass on to the Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate it when we get to a formula which is, unbiased, if you like, and you can judge things by, but you also got that bit in the discretion of the chair and civic officer, but they have to give a written justification. I think that's particularly good because you can't anticipate every sort of invitation, I think, there and that. So I thought it was good. I do have Councillor Whitehouse, Phil Whitehouse, there to ask a question. And Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. Dave, in the areas discussed, it talks about Leslie Bennett giving her views and thoughts. I haven't seen anything to say in the documentation to give us an idea what she actually said. I just wondered if you could clarify from your memory what she said, please, because she clearly has a very valuable comment to make. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for picking that up, Phil. I think one of the reasons we asked Leslie to attend wasn't necessarily that she could do a kind of 10 minutes and then kind of, thank you very much, Leslie, we'll take that into consideration. But it was very much when we had a question about how would this work, where are we with insurances, for instance, and things like that, that we'd got the person who was kind of in the building every day undertaking that and sending the emails backwards and forwards and picking up on the bits that she needed to and booking cars and all the rest of it. So we got that expert in the rooms who could answer those kind of technical things. Her kind of initial point, if I may, was that the process as wasn't working. It was far too involved. It was far too there are too many things, too many moving parts with it and things like that. And she would have very much appreciated a streamlined outcome, which I think we've got to, and actually was broadly the view of pretty much everybody. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, yes, that answers that particular point. Can I comment?
Yes, please. Yes.
The other thing that struck me when I read this documentation was the comments from David Salter, Derek Cross, Joe Powell, and Hughes. And the one that stood out really, there is a common theme with all of the feedback from those past chairs, and that is that they value the role, clearly, as we all do, but they also wanted the freedom to use their common sense. So rather than go down the route of a scoring system, if people are acting in a professional way, and there are rules and regulations in place for us to monitor that through normal council procedures. The feedback from previous chairs was that they want to use that common sense and make decisions themselves. And in particular, Anne use words I had to look in the dictionary for, attenuated. She's saying that the chair's position is reduced in value by comparison to other councils. And she also used a word invidious, to incur resentment at restrictions on supporting charities. To me, if previous council chairs have said these things, I think it needs revisiting, that a scoring system clearly isn't going to help people that have done that job previously and been in that position. So I can't back a scoring system whatsoever. I would want the freedom to use common sense with controls, yes, but certainly I couldn't back what is being presented.
Before I bring in Councillor Robertson in to respond, but I did point out about the acceptance at discretion of chair and civic officer with written justification by the chair recorded. So there is that section in there which allows for, we can call it common sense if you want, but they still have to justify it because the council's reputation is at stake, I suppose. But there is that in there. Is that not enough for you there?
Chair, not really. Any scoring system is open to alternative abuse. It's open to subjectivity, and it just, in the words of the previous chairs, devalues the job.
Well, you said one. Is it one person who said that? Or
all of them have said it in different words, but Anne said it in words that I didn't.
Yes, no, I understand. It's at least you didn't use medieval terms. Councillor Robertson, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I will repeat, Councillor Whitehouse, that this task group was set up to look at a process. It was not set up to look at the wider role of the wider civic function. So a lot of the discussions about we should be able to attend more and whether roles attenuated compared to other councils was far beyond our remit. We were asked to look at the internal process. If members wanted to have a further discussion at that, and there are some of the members who made those comments who've been on this council for a very long time and have never publicly tried to remedy this or tried to raise it at any of the various junctures that they've had access to. That wasn't our role, so it wasn't something that we discussed. And in terms of your argument about common sense, my deeply held view is that actually if people are arguing for more common sense, it's because they lack the ability to prosecute a more proper argument.
Sorry, I have a pause there. Councillor Miles Trent next.
Thank you, Chair. I think this the recommended system is an improvement. I thank Councillor Robertson for his work on the task group. I just had 2 quick points. If I may, there's always a but. I saw at the end, towards the end of Councillor Hughes's comments, that she mentioned expenses for consorts, and that's a point I mentioned in this committee. Was that discussed at all? Would be my first question. And secondly, the only bit that made me slightly nervous, hopefully you can put my mind at rest, was there was on the second page of the report, there was discussion towards the top. They were saying the task group stated if an event does not meet the necessary threshold, essentially the chair can attend anyway, but not claim expenses. And I just had a slight unease about, well, they're either attending in official capacity or they're not. I know most of this is about money and public money, but also the chair is there as a figurehead and representing the council. So I just felt slightly uneasy that there might be a situation where it doesn't actually meet the threshold or the system we've set up, but the chair goes anyway. It just didn't sit very well with me. So, if you could set my mind on rest on that, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Trent. I'll deal with the second one first, which was more a discussion there about we as a council can't ban people from events and we can't bar people from going. So if somebody's been invited to a village fete and then it comes back and it doesn't score highly enough and we say, well, the council isn't going to support sending the chair to that, it doesn't then prevent that person from going under their own steam. So I think that's the point that we were trying to make. And I think what we were saying is that the idea of the council putting public money behind that to provide the car and all the things that go alongside that needs to have some form of process behind it. We think we've come up with what I say a decent process, but it doesn't prevent people, if it doesn't meet that process, from attending anyway. And we were quite happy for chairs to use their discretion if they wanted to take the chain, if they felt comfortable doing so, etc., etc. So I hope that puts your mind at ease on the second one. Unfortunately, I've now spoken consult. Yeah. So we were very specifically addressing a question which was asked in the original overview and scrutiny papers about whether there's currently a budget for expenses which is held by the chair and one which is held by the vice chair, and we were discussing about actually whether it would be more sensible to merge those, so that if the chair can't attend a significant number of events for whatever reason and the vice chair goes, it's not going to place that financial burden on the vice chair, or even a question of a financial burden on the vice chair, or vice versa. So we were very specifically looking into whether that should be merged, and again the response was it was very clearly an appropriate response to do so. I hope that puts your mind at rest on both of them.
Okay. And I thought all village fates scored highly for the district council chair to go, but I mean, that's just me.
Yeah, Chair, just to try and reassure Councillor Whitehouse and other members, indeed, that this was a unanimous decision by all members of that task group. We spent a lot of time ironing it out. But we didn't want to be too restrictive, which the Councillor Robbins already replied to Councillor Trent's point about that the chair can go anywhere, still representing the council, but not paid for by the council because it doesn't score highly enough. Because we thought the chair is someone who should be promoting our strategic plans, local businesses, local charities, and events of that nature, and that should be the focus of the role. When they're representing us, but if they want to go to village fetes invited, we don't want to turn them down. We want to be open and encouraging for that. So that's why we came to that decision. So I hope that will reassure councillors that we came to a sensible decision. We hope the cabinet will endorse it.
Okay. Sid, did you want to come in? No.
I just wanted to make the comment that in the past, the previous matrix was set up. I was a member of that working group previously. Partly it was because it was becoming so frequent, the visits by the then district council chairman. There was something like an average of 3 or 4 a week, which increased the cost. So that was why it was looked at that stage. But I'll remind Councillor Whitehouse of his comment when this first came to scrutiny for us to look at, when he asked, why do we need a chair? What's the purpose of the chair? And the answer was, basically to chair the full council meetings. Whatever happens outside of that chairing the full council meeting is an addition to the work and the promotion of the district. So, hopefully there's enough balance within the proposals to make sure that, it doesn't go completely over the top, but it still allows the chair some flexibility in accepting invitations.
Okay, I could tell you a horror story from my previous council, but I'm not going to. Not in public anyway. Councillor Brian Yates, the last question.
Thank you, Chair. The point system. If an organisation write to the council saying they'd like to invite the chair to their function, do you go back and say, oh, on the point system, you only got one, you don't qualify, thank you? We're going to upset people.
Yeah, what terms are going to be used? It's a good point, that is.
Thank you, Chair. So on that, Councillor Yates, I think it is in the papers, but I'll go through it now again. We intend to put the scoring system on the website so that people hopefully won't get to the stage of emailing it. If it's clearly not going to meet the criteria. We've also suggested that any point where we're unable to support the chair attending on behalf, with the support of the council, that we will respond with an email which includes contact details for the ward councillors, as they may want to invite ward councillors who are obviously able to attend under their own capacity, and to the relevant parish chair. So actually the most appropriate civil head is able to attend that event.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah. Well, the last item was there was further work required, next steps, and it was that the agreed scoring grid be reported to overview and scrutiny, along with the notes of the meeting and written submissions received from previous chairs of LDC. Now, we've had all that. We asked task and finish group to just have the one meeting, and they've done that. And as you say, we'll see how we go, and if there needs to be a review in the future, so be it. But I thought it was a good piece of work there done, so I'm happy to.
Can I just confirm, Chair, that we are going to pass this to Cabinet to look at so it can be introduced?
Sorry?
Can I just confirm that we will also be passing this to Cabinet so it can be introduced? Because it's not actually in the recommendation.
Don't think Cabinet, does Cabinet want to see this? Or full council?
Relevant Cabinet member.
Yeah, well,
Cabinet member and full council. That's the process.
yeah, so we are going to pass it to the relevant. I'm told we're going to pass it. Who was the relevant Cabinet member?
You pass it to Cabinet, and then they can discuss
Oh,
it.
Cabinet. Okay. Well, we're going to pass it on. Yes. Yeah. We can't post it. Can't afford that nowadays. But
Chair, you'd have to
I'll deliver it personally.
vote.
Yeah. Well, whatever he said, it'll be in the notes. Don't worry about it. We'll put it all in the notes. But yes, I think he's saying yes, Councillor Robertson, that we'll do all that. So it is good work. It'll not be put to one side. Yeah, go on then. Speak up. You know, get your own mic. Oh, we shan't said this now.
It's just to say, Chair, that if members wanted to take a vote to confirm they're happy to pass that recommendation on to Cabinet, that's.
Have we got a consensus on this? I think, is that right? I don't really want to have a vote unless I'm really desperate for one day. So, yeah. So we've got a consensus on that. Yeah. Anybody object? Anybody want to stick their neck out and say, "I don't like it"?
I've already done that.
Yeah, the wording wasn't that, good, really, but
Okay.
so I think there's a consensus anyway, because yeah. Thank you very much, Will. Right. Next item then is agenda item 8. Oh yeah. That's, threw me then for a minute, Will. To provide comments and feedback on the operation of the overview and scrutiny structure and the function under this single overview and scrutiny committee. Now, when overview and scrutiny started, there was lots of different experiments and so on. There's one council, Whichaven, that had the single overview and scrutiny committee, and it's annoying me that did, but I couldn't find anything wrong with how they did things, and I think they were referred to when we looked at this a few years ago. Overview and scrutiny. I think I'd say it rather than officers having to say it in detail. We have to look at the practicalities, the work program, the resources, and all the rest of that. But the main thing is whether overview and scrutiny has worked under this new system. Because you've got the before in 3.12, and you hopefully know what the situation is now. So I will let you say a few words, either of you or both of you, or none of you if you don't want to.
Thanks, Chair. As it said, this is really your report in terms of the committee and in terms of what you've achieved and what you've considered over the last 12 months. So it really is that opportunity for you as a committee to kind of reflect and provide your feedback on how this committee is operating, and again, any kind of improvements we can make. I know Will just wants to flag a couple of specific elements in the paper as well.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm not going to go over the whole report because I know that we're tight for time tonight, but just to highlight a couple of things. So for those unaware, previous system of overview and scrutiny was that we had 4 different committees. A previous recommendation via task group recommended taking that down to 1 overall overview and scrutiny committee to reduce the amount of meetings, to better focus resources and members' time on areas for scrutiny within the council. That was before I took over ONS. So I've spoken to officers that have been here since that system was in place previously. The viewpoint seems to be that the new system works much better. There's no overlap of work that there previously was with previous committees. There's no need to have to do what we used to do, which was coordinate the 4 different chairs of the 4 different overview and scrutiny committees, which added another layer to the process. It's much more efficient and streamlined in that respect. There's less stepping on toes of committees wanting to look at similar things. I could talk extensively about how fewer meetings reduces the cost and the resources and all of that, but the crucial thing is that ONS, while you should consider the functions, the priority should be to ensure best value for residents, and are they having good scrutiny done on their behalf. Many of the reports that previously went to these overview and scrutiny committees were always for note. They were just taken there to get a rubber stamping and go, yeah, that's been looked at by members. That is not the case anymore. Reports come here, and if they do try to come through us for note, we make sure that no, if it's coming to ONS, it's because you want members' input, you want their views, you want that feedback from the committee itself, you want them to scrutinise it. So that's something that we've been very keen to change with the new system.
Training.
There is yes, we've had overview and scrutiny training quite recently. Thank you for pointing that out, Chair. So hopefully that's allowed members new to the role to find their feet a little bit easier. We also have a greater sort of emphasis on task groups now than we used to, where ONS has the ability to delegate work to task groups, to look into things a little bit more in depth and bring those findings back. The Civic Matrix task group is a really good example of how you can delegate an issue over to a task group. They can look at it, they can come to a decision, and it can come back here with that work having already been done, rather than having to talk about it at more and more meetings. Those are the main things that I wanted to highlight in terms of the changes compared to the previous system. But as Kerry says, it's really over to yourself as a committee to feedback to us what you think is working well, what do you think would work better, how can we make this committee as effective and efficient as possible for you and for residents. Thank you.
Can I say, I'll bring Sue does to speak on this before. So, but before I bring Sue in, it is that you can make it a more dramatic scrutiny committee, except that we're not able to do that in one sense, in so far as the cabinet are asking us to consider items before it goes to cabinet. So you haven't got the battle there, but you do have better counsel. I think you'd have a better counsel, better way of working and that, and hopefully, you know, the cabinet listens to what scrutiny members say. Even if they disagree, but at least we have a chance to involve all members of the council, all members of the scrutiny committee to have their views known before cabinet make the final decision, or sometimes the full council makes that last final decision. So I personally think that works well. Whether people think there ought to be more than one scrutiny committee is a matter for members. But I do know that when we had 4, there's a lot of reports for noting, and I think it's pressure on officers to come up with reports because it's in the diary. There's a scrutiny meeting of some sort in 2 months' time or whatever. So there is that problem. But newer members won't have the ability to make that judgment. But hopefully older members who've been here previously might have a view. But Sue was on my list.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In terms of best value, the very best value out of scrutiny is when the cabinet listens to what scrutiny committees are saying, you know, and I think that's important. And it's interesting that there are no views from cabinet here, because I would like to see, you know, where cabinet have modified their recommendations, for example.
So what did you say? So is nobody what?
I'd like to have seen something in this
right.
report
Right.
about, you know, where cabinet have accepted recommendations from overview and scrutiny, because I think every single member around this table does take the scrutiny function, the overview and scrutiny function, very seriously. So, you know, that would have been helpful. I'd just like some clarification though under the section number 3, background. In 3.13, it talks about how members can refer topics for the committee, and it says this process has not been utilised as well as hoped, and I don't quite understand that. And then 3.1 bracket 6, I really don't understand this. Track timelines from introduction to final approval. Greater gaps will show earlier ONS involvement, and I just wondered if somebody could give me some explanation as to what those
I think I know the answer.
paragraphs mean. Well, Chair, you might be able to explain. I just couldn't understand
Well,
what they
certainly
meant.
on the first, my view on the first one would be, and I'm happy to be corrected, as I kept telling Will, you know, please correct me at a meeting if ever I'm wrong. Which is that if you look at the constitution of the scrutiny committee, you can see where you can raise items, but you have to go through the process of making sure it's worthwhile with the matrix that we have, and that. So there's an item on later that Councillor Paul Ray has particularly lobbied on, so that shows it does work. And I think on the track timelines, it's just for me that's showing where things have actually happened, and the process through cabinet. But please, yeah.
No, Chair, that is correct. Yeah, in terms of 3.13, that's about how members can best bring things to this committee. I think previously there was some uncertainty about how to do that. I know with some members here, there's been some uncertainty over to do that. Some of that might be down to being new to the committee or being new to the council. But my hope is that with the training that's recently been had, and I know speaking to one member recently about the member toolkit that there is, that outlines how a member can bring things to committee. My hope is that that will improve going forward. In terms of 3.16, which was the tracking of timelines, that is about ensuring that things don't slip through the net, for want of better words. That if an item is requested by members, that it isn't just sort of, oh yeah, we'll get around to that at some point, that it is taken on board, that it is action, that it does come to scrutiny, that it does go to cabinet, and that progress is actually seen, because obviously that's critical for the effective functioning of the committee.
Okay. Councillor Ball, Colin Ball.
Yes, Chair. I mean, having served on this committee in the previous municipal term and the current one, the process to me is much better in that it's more focused. We don't have lots of duplication. We don't have things going to several committees and coordinated committees and all the rest of it. So that certainly is an improvement. A couple of frustrations though. One is how long it takes to get things on the agenda sometimes, and particularly on task groups, because of the lack of resources and the numbers of stuff we have to debate. So, you know, I don't know how we can easily resolve that, but that's just a frustration. And I think a plea about consistency. It's taken some time for some of the members here to speak up, because some of them it's the first time on the council, first time on the committee. And I certainly found it very frustrating in the early years, the early months rather, this municipal year. It was mainly opposition members who were raising issues and asking questions. That's improved a lot recently, and that's great. But let's hope that continues. And I'm just worried if we have a whole scale change of personnel on this committee in the next municipal year, will there be a kind of fresh start and a new beginning? We get people having to learn how to do things again. And that's a little worry, I think. So I just throw that out there.
Okay. I mean, I'm always, I mean, officers are as well, I know, but I'm always open to anybody got any, oh, I've had questions in the past. Fortunately, one individual who used to email me regularly isn't on the committee anymore, but I'm very happy to help with any answers like that, how to get things on and so on. So please, but I'm sure Will and Kerry are both same invitation, maybe. Thank you. Ilona, Vice Chair.
I'll be really interested to hear from other members' views. I know some people here have seen the old system and the new system, but I'll be also interested to hear from other members who see what their opinion is, and also maybe cabinet or other other fellow colleagues about their opinion of this year's ONS, because I think that'd be quite nice to have something from a different perspective as well. My other question is about the task group, because I know this is all based on volunteering as well. At present, I mean, maybe chair or officers, or and see what other members also think. Is there too much? Would there be too much going on? Is there too much task groups at the moment? Because, of course, later in the coming year, there's going to be more task groups, and maybe some are more urgent, and we would be needing more volunteers for those. Are we going to get enough volunteers in the new task groups coming as well? Especially, we did push for recruitment in the current ones at the moment.
I'm doing my best to put people off with new task groups or delay them until other task groups end. I would say to you, from my Leona. I mean, I don't know anybody from the cabinet that wants to. There's a cabinet member there who was in my seat here and also now in the cabinet. Whether Councillor Wilcox, whether you're willing to nod or say what you want from the back there, just briefly, because you'll be on microphone. But in response to Leona's, think about whether you think of it from the other side, if you like, from the cabinet end.
I think you have a vital role to play in the work that you do. Whether that be recommendations you're making with this committee, whether that's the finished groups that you have. that you have a vital role to play, and if there's any process that makes it easier for members to put things on the agenda that you then want to bring forward, then yeah, that's absolutely the way it should be. That's how good scrutiny operates.
Okay, so you're saying, just for those who weren't here, not be able to hear, but Councillor Wilcox, and I put him on the spot, I apologise for that, vital role to play, and I think it's working. Did you want to come in?
Yes,
Phil, and
thank you.
then Paul?
Yep. So feedback.
I've gone off that page, by the way, but, you know, 2 more questions, yeah.
Okay, so feedback, please, from my perspective, is that from a structure point of view, as a new councillor, it's been first class. I think everyone that I've come in contact with has been very helpful, and that's introduced people like me as a new councillor into a new role like this very well. So I think I'd score you on Colin's score 10 out of 10 for that.
-2.
It then comes to the other part of it, which is how we perform as a team. And likewise, I've been really pleased on that as well. Most of the time, we've obviously got differences on various things, and that's how it should be. And then the key thing for me as well is what we actually discuss and making sure going forward that they're really important things, because this council is embarking upon some serious development work out there. And I don't think we want to be bogged down with things that in reality don't add any value to the public. And the one that springs to mind is Knife Angel. I just couldn't see that the time that we spent on that was value for money for anyone. And my plea would be, let's be very careful as to what we actually bring to committee so we can really do a good job on the important points.
Sorry,
Thank you.
just to be clear, did you mean the Knife Angel as a process, or the scrutiny of the Knife Angel, which cost us quite a bit of money?
Sorry, the scrutiny of the
Right,
Knife
okay.
Angel.
Well, I would
process.
disagree with that one, but there you are. That's what we're here for. And I particularly have found it offensive that we actually were paying to give out civic awards, which I'll never forget. Paul Ray, Councillor Paul Ray.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it works well. It is collaborative. It shouldn't be political, and it isn't political. And you don't have people making political speeches. I think one thing we do need to look at, and maybe it's something we can come back, is about the task groups. And are there some things where we can try and make them work better? I'm just throwing out a few ideas. Could they be Zoom, Teams? Could they be a smaller number of people on the task groups? Because there's good work we need to look at, which we haven't been able to, like, for example, the transport task group we've talked about, because of capacity, I guess, of councillors. So I think I'd suggest as a committee that's something that could go onto the work programme and come back at a future meeting, so that we can specifically look at how to get the task groups to work more effectively.
Okay, yes, I mean, we can always improve, and that's the thing, the feedback and then ideas and so on. I appreciate that. David Robertson, then I'd like to move on, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the point about Zoom and Teams, I will remind you, Councillor Ray, we both have a task group at 10:30 on Wednesday via Teams.
Blank looks from the side.
I'll resend you the invite in a minute. But yeah, no, I think it is good that where we can, we are using electronic means for that. I think the overall point I'd like to make here is that overview and scrutiny is, in my opinion, better in the current format rather than the previous 4 committee structure. I wasn't actually on any of the overview and scrutiny committees when there were 4 of them, but I have been on the ONS committee after it was merged, and certainly seeing in the papers that come to council there's so many fewer. That's grammatically abhorrent. Apologies, but a significant reduction in the number of items per noting, which can only be a good thing. And that was one of my points in the initial consultation. The other comment that I would like to make, though, is again around task groups, and particularly potentially rewording them and really focusing on task and finish groups. We have currently only ever had one finished, and it finished about 20 minutes ago. So I think trying to reinforce that and trying to put timelines in about when this group will close, I think that would be very valuable. And I think particularly it's a point that I've made before, and I'll restate now. I'm aware I'm on 3 task groups, or 2 now, but I don't necessarily think it's the best use of resource to put ONS members into the task groups. I think we should be trying encouraging backbench members and members who aren't here.
Do you know how hard I try to?
I'm aware it's not, and it's not a problem coming from your chair, but I think it's incumbent on us all to encourage people in our groups to do that. For me, what I think would be the strongest structure, if we can ever get there, would be it's a member of this committee that chairs any task group, and the members of that task group are made up from elsewhere, so that we can get that wider view in. We've got somebody who's got a foot in both camps who's able to chair it and bring that back to us. I'm aware it's not always that easy, and I'm aware of the difficulties you have with volunteers, but I do think that would be a stronger model for us to follow. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just be aware that anybody who wants to chair a task group must have had some chairing experience as per the constitution that we've had from the toolkit. Did you want to come back, either you two, there on any of those comments?
Only to say that, yes, as Councillor Robertson says, we can do task groups via Zoom and Teams, so that is absolutely fine. And yes, we'll have a look at how we can improve how effective they are. And just to confirm what you said, Chair, that yes, we do try very much to get volunteers for task groups. I know that 12 months ago when we did so, there were a lot of new members who might have been naturally very hesitant,
Yes,
not sure what it
yes.
was. I've spoken to some who have said just as much, and they're now saying, oh, no, now that we've been here 12 months, we'd very much like to sit on them. So when we go out to appeal again for members, hopefully we will get more engagement. And that is a plea to anyone listening as well to volunteer.
Yeah, thank you. That's why you explained that. The recommendation is to provide comments and feedback on the operation of the overview and scrutiny structure. People seem to be happy with the new structure if they'd experienced the old one, or happy with this one if they're not experienced it before. But obviously, there's always opportunities for improvement and reviews of things and getting ideas from other local authorities. And I've certainly spent a lot of time looking at various scrutiny committees throughout the country, and I've been involved in it for many years. So hopefully got those. I don't know how we're supposed to make notes. But I made some notes for you. Well, all right, okay, yeah, righto, yeah, that's the way to do it. So thank everybody for the input there, and thank you, Will and Kerry, for those responses, and for Mike Wilcox, Councillor Wilcox at the back there, for dropping him in it there. Sorry, but you said the ideal person really at that point there. Blame Leona. The next item then is agenda number 9, which is the. Now I can spend a lot of time on this if we wanted to, but I think it's concentrate on the actual strategy and how it's implemented. I would suggest I can draw attention to the recommendations for the Lichfield District 2050 strategy consultation. The committee reviewed the results from the public consultation, that's in an appendix, and the draft Lichfield District strategy 2050. The committee review how the feedback received from both consultations will be used to inform the strategy. And the committee provide any further feedback on the draft strategy, and then the committee provide feedback on the draft year 1 delivery plan. So that's the actual, making in practice the delivery plan. Now I've got from the pre-meeting, we've got 4 speakers already, and Sue Woodward is the first one. Oh, sorry, yeah, well, we'll go straight in with the questions if that's okay. And yeah, so Sue, please, yeah.
Yeah, I'll let them
that's okay.
sit down first.
No, don't let them sit down. No, just get in.
Yeah, we've all had an opportunity to go through the strategy and have input a few times. I mean, one comment I'd make about the consultation, although great efforts have been made to increase the take up of the surveys and so on, it did feel a little bit city heavy to me. I mean, if you look under 3.7, the number of groups and organisations that were city based rather than Burntwood and rural areas, and it seems to be my purpose in life to actually remind this council constantly that it's not just the city that we represent, it's the rural areas and Burntwood as well. So, I mean, even the community organisations that were referred to there were city focused. So just to, in the future, if we can sort of widen that consultation and take leaflets out to other urban areas, Paisley, Burntwood, Whittington Village and so on. But the action plan, I think it's a very ambitious action plan. And what I'd like to know as it goes forward is how are we hitting the targets? So it's a request, please, that when the action plan is being implemented, that there are reports periodically to this committee or to members generally. Just give us could be a RAG rating, we're on target, we're not on target, and so on. That would be really helpful. And it may well be that things have to change over a period because some just become impossible, or some are very easily implemented, thinking optimistically. But clearly a lot of work has gone into this, and hopefully, we'll see results in the very near future. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just mention one of the overall, issue for me, which is the reference to the confident communities, which is on page 39, or at least paragraph 4.2 below that. Confident communities, prosperous communities, green communities, and active communities. It might be my misunderstanding of it, but I know we get this a Labour Party law, where suddenly you get these sort of sections or sectors, and then before you know it, you're concentrating on the sectors and not the overall plan. So, and you could perhaps get diverted. So there's references later on what confident communities and a category, but they don't actually really exist. You don't actually interview them as such. So if you can help me with that, just me, probably everybody else is okay, but just me, that would be helpful. And I'll take in some of the speakers next, if that's okay. Or do you want some time to think about it? Shall I take another? Did you understand my question?
I'm just trying to process the question, to be honest with you, Chair.
What?
I'm just trying to process the question.
Well,
is the
you
question
refer
around-
to confident communities, prosperous communities, but then they get referred to later on. They don't actually exist, do they? I understand how you come to that. Then I have confusion about when they're referred to each time. This is the view of prosperous communities and that, and so on. Maybe I can work on it more and give you an awkward question at full council, but
I think if I'm understanding the question correctly,
it may not be.
No, I very well might not be. You're quite right. The purpose of the overarching strategy is that we have those really clear themes, and we're looking towards 2050 about how we want to shape our district, and how indeed those around us, we want to bring other people with us to shape the district under those very, very broad overarching themes. But as you say, the reality is we need to get a lot more granular in how we actually deliver against that to make sure we're making that necessary progress, which is where that delivery plan comes in. Some of those items will be across a number of those themes. So you may very well have an active or an item which speaks to the active strategy as well as the green strategy, or the green as well as the prosperous, but they're all pulling together towards those overarching themes. I don't think you can, with some exceptions, none of the actions will fall precisely within one of those thematic.
I think there's a graph on page 50 that sort of went with it, but I'll take that away and perhaps talk again without being humiliated offline, as it were, with officers. Phil Whitehouse was next, if you remember. Yeah, please. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Jeff. I think first of all, Kerry and the team and Doug, there's a lot of work gone into this, and you're to be congratulated, I think, in pulling together a very comprehensive and range of tasks and strategies. One of the things, when I looked at the respondents' feedback, people were a little bit skeptical about, can it be afforded? Can it be delivered? And then further on in the review, it talks about gaining the buy-in from residents, ensuring stakeholders and everyone are kept involved. To me, that's the nub of the problem. And I'm just wondering what your specific plans are covering that particular side of it to get people on board on a regular basis. Thank you.
If I can start on that, so I think that's the nub of the issue, and I think in some ways actually that's where the strategy started from saying historically where we would either do a 1-year delivery plan or a 4-year Lichfield District Council strategy. This has purposely shifted away from that to say actually it's a much longer strategy. It's not just, or it's envisaged that it's not just a Lichfield District Council strategy, but that it is one that we feel other people can buy into. Hence the hard yards that have gone into trying to bring more people with us. I don't think that our outreach or engagement, or however you want to view that, is done by any stretch of the imagination. This is the kernel. This is the start of something which we will have to continue working at, and perhaps working even harder at over the coming years. I think historically there has been a disconnect between the council and quite often a lot of community groups and community organisations on the front line of the community, doing things which are really helping our district and supporting it, but sometimes there's perhaps a little bit of friction between those groups and the council. So it's trying to work out, well, actually, how do we as a council, how do we provide the infrastructure and support for those community groups to go and do what they do? how does sometimes, frankly, we step out of the way and, and just let them get on with it, because sometimes we're a blocker to those things. But equally, where they need additional support, how can we provide that as well? And that's just on the, you know, the sort of the one aspect of things. So I think there's a lot of work still to do. I think the effort that we've put in up front to this to really get people involved is a testament to Kerry and her team, and Simon as well, in terms of our statements of intent of how we expect to continue over the coming years. So is there anything you wanted to add to that, Kerry? So
Yeah, without reiterating what Councillor Plunner said, it has got to be an ongoing program of communication and engagement as well. So we were talking about this at leadership team with officers this morning. You know, once this strategic plan is signed off and by full council, it is something that, again, internally, we have to make sure all of our officers are owning and advocating as well. We've got to make sure that through that delivery plan, and go back to Councillor Woodward's comments, that we are showing progress against delivery as well, because as you say, Councillor Whitehouse, that, you know, there is some scepticism out there of, will this actually be delivered? Hence why we've you know, put in that delivery plan some short-term deliverables as well as some more bigger ticket deliverables, because we need to start showing that we are delivering against this. And again, it goes back to an earlier comment about, you said we did. We need to make sure we've got continual opportunities to get those messages out. Not just with the district council comms, but also how we engage stakeholders and partners as well, to share the good news stories around how we're all working together to deliver against this.
Okay, thank you. I've got Colin and then Paul on my list.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, my concerns are very similar to Councillor Whitehouse's. That we had, what was it, just over 3,000 people respond to the survey, which I think on my calculation is 3% of the district's population. So how confident are we that we can engage the whole of the community and other stakeholders in the process, if that's a level of consultation in the initial design of the plan? And then looking at a specific thing, if I can find it, by 2028, we'll achieve 40% affordable housing on council-owned sites and encourage developers to strive for the same target, something which all members here will know is very close to my heart. But that's a very tight timescale to achieve that, when we've never achieved as much as 20% as a rule, and it's probably at 15% on average over the 5 years that I've been on the council. So what are the practical steps will be put in place to make that happen? And how can we make sure that we get more than 3% of the population engaged in helping deliver this plan?
if I on the consultation piece, I think it's hard to disagree that 3% isn't a huge amount of our population. On the flip side of that, it is far in excess of any consultation that the council has ever done, ever in its in the history of the council, by an order of magnitude larger. So I would say we're getting a lot better. I think it just shows the extent to which we need to put that legwork in to really engage with a wider proportion of our communities. And I think, and to Councillor Woodward's point earlier on, there has been that noticeable discrepancy between responses from Lichfield and from Burntwood and from the rurals. We almost need to do so much more effort within Burntwood than we do in Lichfield to try and lift that up. But I would say I don't think that's because officers haven't been aware of that or haven't even put the legwork in to do that. That's been a very, very conscious effort. There's still more to do.
And just to add some further context as well, this strategy has been, I think, at least 18 months in development, and it did start off with the first public engagement called Together We, which was towards the end of 2022. which again garnered, I think it was roughly 7,500 responses, and that was a more kind of a different type of consultation of tell us about your priorities. What we were asking a bit more of respondents this time. We were actually asking them, can you have a read of the, we've taken that results from that 22 survey, and we think we've interpreted what your priorities are, but can you have a look and have a read of the strategy and give us some more specific feedback on it? So I think given the ask, we were probably never going to, unfortunately, kind of reach the heights of 7,500 residents who would happily read a strategy document. But I think as Councillor Pullins got at, compared to some other areas, 3,000 is, not going to use the word good because we should absolutely be striving for more, but better than some other areas do get. But I just wanted to provide that context of it was, the first drafting of this was based on a more broader public consultation back in 2022.
Do you think you've got a representative, age and geographical distribution? Have you been able to look at that?
Chair,
Aware
thank you
of that.
so much for highlighting that point. In the original iteration, no, we weren't. We noticed a substantial drop off once you got under the age of about 55, perhaps even 40, 45 perhaps. So that's why we went back out. So that this report is delayed slightly because of the fact that we went back out to proactively seek the views of those from a younger demographic. I think we've got an additional 200 responses, which again, on one hand, okay, it's not a huge number, but it is 200 more than we had before. Is it representative? I think it's as good as we're going to get today. Does that mean that we shouldn't strive to get an even better response next time around? Well, absolutely not. It just provides a higher benchmark for our officers to achieve next time.
Okay, no, thank you.
And just to add with, self-selecting surveys, it is really challenging to try and get a representative sample. I've spent many years trying and failing, but that absolutely doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying and keep trying different ways to engage different communities and continuing to improve. There is ways that you can get a representative sample. It normally involves trying to engage market research companies.
We did that at the county once years ago. Yeah,
indeed. But there's definitely some further learning that we will be taking as officers from this about what more we can try and different approaches we can try next time as well.
Thank you. I've got a few more speakers yet, but I hope they'll be relatively brief. Paul, next, please, and then Dave.
Yes, and from rereading it again, I can see the work that's gone into it, and thank you for that. And I can see like public transport was something where it's certainly got more focus and more detail around it. One thing that's still not in there, which I highlighted, was tourism in the prosperous communities. There's nothing in there about tourism. I wonder if that could just be revisited. It's an important part of the strategy of this council, and whether there's a specific metric. I know we're trying to get people to stay more than one night, where there's a metric around that we could introduce, because it's an important part. And then my other sort of question was, just that point about, so this doesn't just sit in the cupboard and gather dust, so it becomes a live document. What are the thoughts about reporting back? Does it come back to ONS annually? Is there an update report to members, which has been mentioned? So because that's important that we do keep it reviewed on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think the delivery plan is a really useful way of doing that. I think having said that, though, delivery plan is important to make sure we're on track on the delivery plans. I think there's also a question about, are the items on the delivery plan also connecting to the overarching themes, and are they doing it in a way which remains meaningful? I think somebody made the point earlier on, plans will change, the district will change between now and 2050. What we think might be a way of achieving confident, prosperous, active green communities today may very well be entirely different in 10 years' time. So just, I suppose, yes, making sure we're delivering on the delivery plan, yep, but also double checking that the delivery plan speaks to the overarching themes is a really important way. And I don't think there's a better way of doing that than through ONS.
Okay.
Ben, can you look at
You did mark on Paul.
when I made that point. I think
Yeah, we'll review that, Councillor Ray.
Okay, thank you. We've got Dave, Claire, and Colin again, briefly.
Thank you, Chair. You put a big long document in front of me, so I've been through line by line. So I will try
Any
and be
questions?
brief as there's a lot more than three here. Page 93 about prosperous communities, and there's nothing in there about incomes.
About what, sorry?
Incomes. We want our community to be prosperous. Surely we should have something in there about incomes. Now, I'm comfortable with leaving what metric that is, whether it's going to be medium incomes growing at greater than the rate of inflation or something about that. Even if it's something about the real living wage, which I know as of 2 days ago, we're now an accredited living wage employer, which is something I think we should all celebrate. That seems to be a bit of an oversight. Page 97, by 2038, we will increase the amount of green space in the district. No, you will not. I think you might increase the value of the amount of the green space in the district. You might want to invest in a little bit more, but unless you're going to try and annex a bit of Cannock or maybe a bit of East Staffs, I don't know that is ever going to be achievable. So it might need a bit of a reword. Page 100. By 2028, we will introduce a green corridor between Lichfield and Birtwood to support sustainable travel. I think that's talking about the Greenway project. I think that's going to be a brilliant resource for people to use, but I think that's going to be recreation and leisure. I can't see many people coming to work by a bike. Like if you live in Boney Hay, for instance, in Birtwood, you're not going to go all the way to the south of Birtwood to then hop on the old railway line to come up. You're probably going to be coming down the existing road. So I think saying that's going to help support sustainable travel, I just don't see it being used that way. I'm aware there may be a difference of opinion on that, but I think it's worth pulling out now. After that, I'm on to the 1-year delivery programs. Do you want to come back on those? Or
We'll take those away.
Good, well done, well done.
Okay, carry on to the ones. Thank you very much. Appendix C, page 105. Engage with the owners of the top 80 empty properties. Please define top 80 empty properties, because I don't understand that. Then page 107. We've got lobbying of key infrastructure partners to ensure the views of the district are heard. That's A, immeasurable, and B, ongoing. So I don't know what it's doing in a 1-year delivery program. Then I'm on to page 111. That's just a further point about if we are going to put something in there about real living wage, then actually we can include that LDC and LWMTS have achieved that accreditation. Then 112, which is actually the one I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, the improved educational attainment of young people, really important point for us to be looking at. I'm very uncomfortable with what we've got in the baseline there. GCSEs equivalent in English and maths by age 19. I'm assuming actually we're talking about level 2 NVQ equivalent GCSEs. Rather that's missing because obviously a grade 1 is a GCSE and there's still the requirement to resit. If we can add or replace an outcome in there with reference to attainment 8, it'll make our issues line up with more appropriately what schools are measured on. Progress 8 is their big one, but I don't think that's necessarily appropriate for what we're looking at. And a potential there again to look at key stage 2 age-related expectations. I was a secondary school teacher for a long time, and actually by the time they're 11, you've often missed the boat with a lot of the interventions you can do, and whether it's worth looking at key stage 2 age-related expectations and putting a target there so we can engage with primary schools. And then something else in there about ESOL qualifications for people who need them in order to be able to access employment. Again, it's missing from the rest of the document, and I think that's something that we could really add value to and get more people into the employment market. 113 in active communities. We're going to develop a proposal for a small grant scheme to be submitted as part of the MTFS process. I thought there was already a line for small grants in the MTFS. So I think we may have already achieved that one well ahead of time.
A bit more specific, I think, on that one, David, specifically for active communities.
Okay. Okay. Page 114, I significantly doubt whether you're going to get paddle tennis open for Q3. 116, increase
these questions, because you're just giving comments, it seems.
Well, you told me to be quick, and then said
no, but they already have questions. If you want, I mean, there's nothing to stop you emailing officers and the leader on these. I'm not sure, you know.
So, I mean, I'm happy to leave it there if you prefer me to pick up our emails, Chair.
Have you got any answers? Have you got any answers to any of those yet?
I'm still writing them down. But yeah, I think if you want to email the list over and we can come back line by line, if there's any, are there any burning thematic principles that you want us to answer today? Happy to do so through you, Chair.
Okay, there's another couple where again it's that it's an ongoing thing and it's reviewed every quarter and whether that belongs in a delivery plan, and then I'll leave it there.
I was just going to say around that point, I think on those lines in particular, and again, it goes back to the point about the plan will need to be a bit iterative and evolve. I think where some of those where that's ongoing, I think it's more about through the next 12 months, helping to define what specific kind of so for the example, infrastructure is predominantly around highways and health facilities, isn't it? So again, probably where we want to get to is being more specific about what we want to achieve around some of those, that lobbying of those particular partners over the next 12 months.
And just one, if I may, where we talk about Q1, Q2, Q3, etc. If this is running the civic year 24 to 25, that may perhaps give us an extra few months to deliver some of this stuff. Yeah, but in all reality, I think the quarters aren't calendar year; they're running the civic year. So you need to add a couple of months on what you might be thinking of Q3. Well, add on one more then.
Okay,
Clarified, please, because
the years.
I assumed that this was parallel with the financial year, April to end of March. You're saying civic year, which means end of May to end.
It's financial year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So you better start hurrying.
Okay, well, let's clear that one up straight away. Thank you. Claire, you've been waiting patiently. Then Colin, that's it. I'd like to say, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have three really quick questions. Right, the first one, as only as a result of the last one, how do we feed back and help shape this report is the first one of observations we note in this without bringing it to a committee like this and going through it line by line. That's one. The second one is from an earlier comment. How are we incorporating feedback from other sources, such as the County Council Health and Care Committee, into this with things such as promoting residents into our healthy lifestyle? Because if we've got other committees ongoing, they're bringing back some really important stuff, then the question from earlier is now valid. How are we incorporating that? And the third one, it was really good to hear you say this is very, very broad, and it has to be when we're looking at 2050. I completely and utterly agree with that. However, when we look at Active Communities 2028, some of the comments from residents' feedback, 2 out of the 5 were about cycle paths. And yet we've got nothing mentioned in there, but we do have some very specific measurable things in there, such as adventure golf, climbing wall, paddle tennis, obstacle course racing. That's not very broad, that's very specific. So the question is, how are we ensuring that this is not being influenced by any particular personalities with influence, but kept wider and very broad for the whole of the residents based on all of those sources? Thank you.
Let's switch over.
Well, thanks, Claire. I'm going to take 2 of those questions and then throw another one at Kerry. In terms of feedback, instead of going through line by line, my view, in terms of how particularly Cabinet or full council might want to consider that information, is that either before or immediately following overview and scrutiny, perhaps following overview and scrutiny might sit better. We're more than welcome to take any feedback of that and make sure that it's incorporated into the Cabinet discussion or even into full council, particularly where there may be lots and lots of questions about particular line items that you might not want to take ages talking about. Councillor Robertson, I say in jest. No, but you're right though, because they deserve answers, and a lot of the time it's just a very simple answer or a very simple question. In terms of the broad aspect of the strategy versus the very specific actions in there, and take cycle paths as a specific example. think one of the challenges we have as a district council is that frequently we are the council, whether that's the county council, the parish council, the district, it's the council. And that's our fault. It's nobody else's, because that's just the way it is. And so a lot of the feedback we get back from our residents, and we'll all have experience of this, is about something that perhaps the district doesn't have direct. I'll be careful with my words.
Carry on.
Yeah. But I always use the analogy. It's a bit like the fire service and the NHS or the paramedics. They both don't want you to fall over and hurt yourself. They both don't want you to get burnt. But in terms of how they address that and how they assist in any given situation, they've got fundamentally different priorities and funding priorities and different ways of helping. And I think that's similar with the district council. We don't go around creating cycle paths. We don't have powers over the roads, for instance, to do that typically, but we can do that through our long-term planning powers, perhaps, for new developments, even though sometimes that might lead to a cycle path coming out of a development and then onto a big main road and not going anywhere, but that's another debate for another day. So there's longer term, sort of more broad actions that we could take, which might be incorporate cycle paths into an active travel scheme, but there's not a very specific activity for that. On the flip side of that, we do have parks, we do have a number of other areas that we do have direct control over, and sometimes that does allow us to be really specific about what we're going to put in there. And that may feel sometimes like we're not responding directly to the main thrust of our residents' requirements or requests, but I think that's perhaps because of the narrower powers that we have, rather than the fact we're ignoring what they're saying. But sometimes those requests take a while to find their way through good policy, essentially. The other one about incorporating feedback from the county is the one that I was going to throw at Kerry.
I'm not sure I've got a definitive answer to it, but I think it goes back to that ongoing communication point, and that this has to be a plan and a delivery plan that councillors own, officers own, and this delivery plan isn't a once and done. It will have to evolve and iterate. And how do we make sure we pick up mechanisms and opportunities to get that feedback and spot therefore other potential actions that need to be reflected in the delivery plan. So I think, as we've talked about, making sure we come back here regularly with an update on progress gives us all a really good reminder to say, and what else have scrutiny recently been discussed that actually needs to feed in this, including the links through to the health committee. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to make sure we're using the mechanisms we've got to keep reviewing this delivery plan and making sure it's as ambitious for the district as it can be and starting to have a real difference as well.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. Just Colin and then Miles, the last two.
Yeah, two quick ones on the delivery plan. Page 105, the bottom. Develop a plan of further actions to increase the supply of affordable rental housing properties. I guess the question is how and with whom, and hopefully not just the usual suspects, but I'll leave that hanging. And the second one is the top of the next page, 106. Lobbying of registered providers. I don't know why we just don't call them housing associations, of social housing to improve the conditions and maintenance of properties. Quarterly review meetings in place. And yes, those are in place, but I just wonder whether that's enough. And should we not be thinking about regular walkabouts in the local communities with ward members, with the local neighbourhood coaches to spot things early on as a process of feeding into those quarterly sessions? Because if it's only quarterly sessions with the last one was with myself and the cabinet member, and I think it was a good session, but that relied only on our own personal experiences. But we didn't have a feed in from all the other groups and all the other members. So we don't know what's happening in some localities. So I just wonder if there's a process of capturing that as part of it, perhaps.
Yeah, I think there's I think we absolutely would want to be doing that. I think the delivery plan is about capturing the right level of action, isn't it, without dropping down into all the sort of the supporting actions that would be required, whilst also capturing the most meaningful ones. And if those need tweaking to capture that, then we can absolutely do so.
Okay, and Miles, the last speaker, if I may, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is a really boring practical point, so I'm going to be really brief before you start throwing things at me. We've discussed this coming back regularly to ONS, which I completely agree would be healthy. And we've also discussed quite a bit that the strategy will be, as I understand it, a living document over time and that it will evolve. It was just a plea that as and when it does come back, if it can be, if any modifications to drafting can be marked up.
Yes.
I've basically made a point about track changes.
Good
haven't I?
idea, yeah.
I can see that there's been amendments, but it'd be really useful. I think it would help speed up scrutiny if we can see how it's been amended and see different versions. So that's my boring point.
As officers will know, I'm a long-term fan of putting tracks changes onto all documents. So yeah, you are absolutely preaching to the converted there. Yes, absolutely.
No, that does happen. So that's great. Yeah, thanks. That's important. I'm not going to read out the recommendation. I did that at the beginning, and I think we've done that. We've certainly given you lots of feedback and ideas, and you've on about promised, if you like, feedback to this committee, and then we can look at that. So that's great. I appreciate your time in that, and thank you very much. We're running out of time. I'll have to skip number 10. Now, if anybody wants to research paddle tennis on the District Council website, you've got to spell it with 2 Ds and 2 Ls to get the oldest stuff. It's only in recent times that we've got paddle with 1 D and 1 L. Also, as you know, there was somebody on holiday and they particularly taken by this particular sport. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you where Councillor Andy Smith is at the moment, but he has sent me 2 website links to camel racing. Now, I don't know whether, well, I hope not. I hope he's not going to, that's just coincidence, really. Then, I do have the chief executive there, I'm pleased to say, but also Michael Hampson, probably the chief executive would like to introduce your colleague there, but his name is at the bottom of this report here, which is, you see, on the microsports.co.uk. And I think we've all know a lot more about paddle tennis, which I was convinced it was involving water when I first came across it on our reports, than we did some time ago. Now, this was going to be a real problem for me, this particular report, with trying to keep people off the planning issues of scrutiny, but I think things have moved on a little bit from there. And so hopefully members will be sticking to the issues of whether this is a good idea and why it's a good idea and whether it's best value and that, and the planning matters that are changed will be a matter for the planning committee, I would suggest. So if you can do that, and I'm grateful for Paul Bray for actually ensuring this was on here. And you see, you can, as an ordinary member, get things on this report, get things on this committee, and I'm grateful for that. So, Chief Executive, please, yes, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So just very briefly, I would like to introduce Michael Hampson, who is a director with Microsports. Full Council asked LWM, our wholly owned company, to undertake the introduction and provision of these new sport activities, but we've subcontracted some of that work to Microsports. So I'm very pleased to see Michael with us tonight, and I'm sure he would be more than happy to answer as many of the questions as you would like to fire at him, Chair. With the leader, obviously.
Well, clever questions. There was any question. But I've got a few. I'm going to ask Paul Ray first of all. Then we've got Phil Whitehouse, Sue Woodward, and Claire Booker. So that's the current list at the moment. Paul, if you wanted to get in early.
Yeah,
thank you.
The first thing I was going to say, I need to declare an interest. It just occurred to me because my son used to be, when he was a student, used to be a coach for Microsports.
Oh, right.
I think it better just make that point. Yeah. So, and thanks, Chair, for putting this on the agenda because I know it's important to other members and residents, and I know Claire's had an active interest in this as well. Hence, I requested this and those specific questions. I just want to say I fully support investment in leisure infrastructure in our community. That is really interesting. So I have an objection about spending this money on leisure infrastructure. But I guess what I want to be reassured is that we are using the money for the right priority, and that this investment is being fully researched and is in line with the sports strategy of the council. And I'll come back to that in a bit. So the questions I've raised, just one specific question, and then I'll just go on to my some more detailed point. One about the maintenance costs, and I saw the reference in there about how the user fees will fund the maintenance. But I guess on a ongoing basis, after every so many years, the court will need to be resurfaced, the walls will need to be replaced. How is that going to be funded? So that's my first question. But then my main point is about how this decision has been reached, because when you research the council's sports strategy and all the related sort of documentation and policy documents, which the council spent a lot of time and a lot of money producing, this doesn't come up as a priority. So to understand how we've reached this decision so far. So specifically, if you look at the playing pitch strategy of 2020, the priorities in there doesn't reference paddle tennis, it references 3G pitches, it references bowls, improving bowls facilities, it references tennis, improving the tennis facilities. The infrastructure delivery plan of the council says that there are enough courts in the district, and actually there's another bit of research which shows that, but they're underutilized, but then another research supports that, which shows that 40% of the courts, only a big in part, only 40%, the capacity, the utilization is only 40%. And then with the SIL regulation 123 list, which lists the sort of approved infrastructure, community infrastructure spend, what that says, it doesn't specifically refer to paddle tennis, because when it says when you're looking at community infrastructure, you then need to turn to the playing pitch strategy. So I'm just making the same point. That doesn't refer to paddle tennis. So a decision along the way has been reached that this is the right thing to do, which isn't in line with all that research and that strategy which the council has invested in and has been consulted with our residents. So for the one question then about maintenance costs, about the long-term sort of capital expenditure maintenance costs, and that question about how we've reached this decision on the basis that I can't see that it's consistent with the long-term, the strategy policy documents that the council has in relation to sports facilities in the district.
Well, I think that's a pretty good question.
Can I come in, Chair, just on the second question in terms of how the decision was reached, and then perhaps I can hand over to Simon and Michael for some of the more specific details of it. But I think in terms of whilst we have the policy, the strategies and policies around playing pitch provision and 3G and all of those, at its core is a strategy for the council to get more people more active more often. That is what it boils down to, essentially. That's why we're investing in a new leisure centre. That's why we've taken leisure back in-house. That's why we've taken the decision to take, I think, about 1.3 million of SIL funding and invest it into a whole variety of different facilities across the district. I don't think that, and then perhaps this is touching on our previous papers slightly as well, but we've got a high-level thematic sort of strategy of having active communities. How that, or what form that takes, whether that's through paddle tennis or whether it's through a different sport which might emerge in 10 years' time, which we've never even heard of yet, I don't think we ought to be beholden to a strategy which specifically says which sports we're going to actually support. We should actually be really focused on how do we get people out doing more often, etc. And I think that's the principle that you're aligned with. I think the principle of paddle tennis is one that was arrived at. I don't think there was a particular strategy to pursue paddle tennis. It was an opportunity that arose for us, particularly to put away from a leisure centre. I think that was done very much on purpose, to put activities like this away from the traditional places that people might go and into the heart of the community. And paddle tennis really fits that bill. So I'd say it totally aligns with our strategy, whilst perhaps not being specifically named in the strategy. Don't know if there's anything that Simon or...
Did anybody else want to add anything before I bring Paul back? Did you? No? Leaving the leader to, yeah.
Sorry,
so
Simon, improving the tennis facilities, Chair, is essentially what we have tried to do. So obviously we've got very vibrant tennis facilities in Beacon Park. We've recently resurfaced the tennis courts in Burntwood. alongside the leisure centre as well. I'm hoping, and I'm going to probably throw him under the bus as I say this, I'm hoping that Michael can talk a little bit about how actually paddle is a deviation or a progression of tennis.
Yeah, so just quickly, the sort of the Lawn Tennis Association obviously adopted paddle as part of there. So when tennis is referred to, paddle is included within that tennis offering as well. And they've just actually in the recent sort of couple of weeks released their strategy, which includes attracting, growing, and diversifying the tennis paddle workforce to create more opportunities to play and compete. And then also a big part of their strategy is a focus on parks, covered courts, community indoor tennis centres, and paddle. So I guess that this paddle facility fits kind of with their at the core of their strategy. And then my other kind of bit to add into that would be that the other facilities that are being built with the SIL money do include the sort of more traditional sports, for want of a better phrase, with, as Simon says, the tennis courts, the golf, also the 3G pitch at the new leisure centre as well. So I think it's important that obviously we are trying to sort of, you know, have an impact on those traditional sports, but also diversify the offering for the people that are inactive and give them something a little bit different to become active, which is the whole point of the project, really, to get more people more active. So
it's like cricket and the long 5-day test. You wanted to come up, Paul?
Yeah, thank you, the three of you. I guess, you know, with what W was saying there, I don't really buy that. You can't have these strategies, these policy documents, which aren't just written, you know, off the cuff. They are fully researched and by professional sports bodies and with the community. We need to listen to what they say. And I suppose I understand that paddle tennis might be a very exciting sport for the future, but is that the best use of our funding, this £400,000? If you take tennis, it seems that we have some good facilities in this district, but they are underutilised. Why can't we use that money, for example, to promote that sport more, and therefore we get that utilisation of our infrastructure for tennis up? So that's just an example. It's a question about where we are best served in using that £400,000.
Can I say, basically, is there any evidence of that working where promoting will actually increase it, or was paddle tennis just taking off and taking over?
So, Chair, can I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about the popularity and the growth of paddle tennis and things as well, but a clear component in our consideration of how to use the SIL funding best was to think about the revenue projections, the income that it would generate for us. That was on the basis of the decision that we would bring back in-house our leisure centres and the financial pressures that those leisure centres are under at the moment, and longer term are likely to be under as well. So we projected, and I worked on the financial case with Anthony as well, we projected that the investment in each of the new sports facilities we talked about would generate about £450,000 of revenue going forward. In answer to Councillor Ray's earlier question about maintenance, we would therefore we will create a sync fund from that as well. So about a third of that revenue would go into a sync fund on an annual basis, so that we could ensure that all of the new facilities are adequately maintained going forward. But the remainder of it, I believe, will be a really important key component to ensuring that our leisure services break even, given that we, as I say, we're under financial pressures at the moment in those areas. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about popularity of growth of paddle.
Yeah, just on the tennis side, I mean, sort of within the district at the moment, myself and my company actively involved with the work at the tennis club. That's seen £400,000 being spent on it in the last 5 years. And then I think the courts and the park, Beacon Park themselves, resurfaced in 2015, I believe. And there's a sink that's run by a charity, Beacon Park Tennis, that's on track with a sinking fund that, as and when those courts need to be resurfaced, that they will have the funds to do so. So that's kind of I know, Paul, you referred to the 40% utilisation that actually across nationally is really high, and the Lawn Tennis Association consider that to be sort of a national flagship site for park tennis in the UK, and then they're referencing how they want to sort of expand on that in their current strategy they've just released.
Okay. If the next speaker then is Phil Whitehouse.
So, Chair, I just had
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to get, it was just to Councillor Ray's point. That's all about the strategy, and I certainly wasn't suggesting that we ignore the strategies whatsoever. And I'm not sure which strategy in particular you're referring to, but certainly the playing pitch strategy from Lichfield District Council 2020, which may be the one you're referring to. It has a specific section talking about tennis and tennis courts. And as Michael said, yeah, the paddle tennis falls under that category of tennis. There's a specific line in that strategy which says improve quality of local authority courts and accompanying ancillary provision, first and foremost focusing on Beacon Park due to the significant informal demand already on site. So perhaps that might suggest that not only are we not listening to the strategy, but we're actually following it to the letter, including the location.
A good attempt there, I thought. Councillor Waterson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on Simon's point about revenue projections. When I opened the paperwork, I was actually expecting to see something like that in there because it's a pretty important decision going forward to look at this. So I just wondered when this committee will be able to see such reports, please, Simon. Financial projections. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to circulate that report after the meeting. That's okay. Again, I'm essentially being put on the hook by the financial director to ensure that I deliver that revenue income stream as well. So I'll show you what those projections are.
Okay, thank you. Sue next then, please, and then Claire, then Miles.
Yeah,
then Colin, apparently.
Thanks, Chair. Just picking
Dave,
up the
maybe.
point that Paul Ray made. I'd never heard of paddle tennis before last summer, and I suspect that other members of the committee are in exactly the same position. And it's quite exciting to think that we can get ahead of the curve and capitalise on some of the sort of the new and emerging sports. So you know, in terms of the principle, that's fine. I just want to ask though, on the forward plan that was published yesterday, it's still got installation of paddle tennis courts at Burntwood Leisure Centre with a decision due this month. Can you give me some clarification? Because I don't think, to start off with at least, 2 sets of paddle tennis courts are going to be viable within this district, but it's there on the forward plan. If someone would like to check, it's there that says decision this month.
I think. Oh, sorry. Do you have a response? I think I know what you're referring to. I'm just quickly pulling it up here. What it says is the resurfacing of the existing tennis court at Burntwood Leisure Centre and installation of paddle board activity at Burntwood Leisure Centre. You're quite right. Forgive me. That needs fixing. The end.
Yeah. Okay, cabinet decision April 2024 as well. As you said.
Well, I was just going to reiterate what the leader said, Chair. That's an error. We will change the forward plan.
Oh, right.
But the resurfacing of the tennis courts at Burntwood has more or less been completed. Yes.
Yes. I mean, the other errors will be in this forward plan. I wonder now. I was relying on that. Claire, yes, please, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regards to the 40%, the report was the one that was done by SLC. It's in paragraph 4.5.5, and it specifically talks about 40% use of the paddle tennis courts. So it was your report that you provided to us that said it. My specific questions are, so the report that you provided to us for this committee, where you said the answers to members' questions are as follows, and you list bullet points there to answer the questions. There's a couple of things there. I'd just like to see some sources of where that comes from. For example, since 2019, the number of UK paddle tennis companies registered each year has risen by 1,771%. Source, please. Global paddle market is worth $231 million in 2022 and will reach $480 by 2028. Europe occupying about 70% of that market. What's the source of that, please? I'd like some sources to some of the things that are being put down here for us to really understand where you're getting that information from. And that's the sort of overview and scrutiny that we are doing, and the due diligence that the real work has been done and there's proven evidence behind it. So what are the sources to some of the things that are put there? The second point that I want to make, and the questions behind it, I have absolutely no problem with paddle tennis. I'd just like to put that out there in the public process. So my family are very much cricket people, and we have seen over the years cricket change from test matches to the T20 format and to the 100. And actually, you know, you need to keep introducing new and vibrant ways of doing things. And so therefore paddle tennis is that. So there's a few questions that I raise here. What about, before we go and spend so much of public money, are we not doing a feasibility study that it is valid? Or do we have the robust sources that prove that that's the case? That's why I go on about the sources, because I've got nothing against these diversification and getting people more active. So sources and prove it's good. The report that was done to ask residents their opinion. This is one of my problems. A list of 10 things were given. Or however many was, a list of so many things were given. Please rank them from 1 to 10, which you see as most important and which is least important. Who created that list? Because if it was created by a bunch of 18 to 28-year-olds, there's no wonder there's obstacle courses on there. If it was created by a bunch of octogenarians, then great, goals might be on there, but you know, they might have created it. I had a conversation with my 12-year-old son who wants to go and work for Lego. Right, bear with me. And I said to him about what he would create. If he goes to work to Lego when he's 35, all we're going to get is Star Wars Lego and Lego City. We're not going to have architecture. We're not going to have Lego Friends. We're not going to have any of those things. So we had a really good conversation about diversity, inclusion, and why diversity is good. So who created that list? Because if it was one person or it was a number of people with the same demographics, it's no wonder we have similar items on it. So I'd like to know who created the list, because diversity would give us a broad list. And how, I think we might have answered this question, how did upgrade tennis suddenly morph into this paddle tennis? Because upgrading tennis is here. Great. A lot of people are ticking that as residents going, oh yeah, upgrade tennis. And it's suddenly morphed into paddle tennis, £400,000. That's a big jump to residents who said, I never ticked paddle tennis. I ticked upgrade tennis. So there's my questions.
Thank you.
Do you want to take the high level answer on that, and then perhaps Simon could add some more detail or some more colour on it? I think in terms of the survey, I think, and you'll have to forgive me, I don't know exactly who came up with the list, but I know it went through various iterations of, oh, should we put this in, should we take that out, and come up with a list of activities. Simon might be able to add a few more names to the list. But I think there's, and again, this is back to the Lichfield District 2050 strategy and consultation. I think there's a danger in creating a list, because it's, by the very fact it's a list, it's restrictive. Equally, there's a danger of just saying an open-ended question, and there's and as you say, yeah, the more diverse people you get, demographics to put into the list, the stronger it is. Totally understand that. One of the items on there, I think, was hoverboarding on football pitches. What on earth are you talking about? Why you got hoverboarding on football pitches? What a ridiculous idea. Well, actually, people were talking about it, and people went and answered and gave responses. And so it's a really hard challenge to get people to feel suitably emotionally invested to go and respond to a council survey, frankly. So I think frankly, some of the things on there were, how do we get people to actually talk about this, and how do we get people to actually respond to it and give us their feedback? What it wasn't, and I don't think it was ever framed as such, although I understand why some people might have thought it wasn't a referendum on, we've got £1 million to spend, or £500,000 or 100 or whatever. You tell us, and we'll go and deliver exactly what, whatever you say. It was designed to generate some community responses about what sort of activities they might want to see coming forward. Some of which I think we are bringing forward, others which might need to wait. Yeah. Don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Just briefly, please, Chair. So to add to what the leader has said, I think we had about 2,000 responses to the consultation. I can't remember offhand, but it was around that number, I think. So in terms of building the list, there are a number of people that were involved, but what we undertook was we had to look at the SLC consultancy that we'd commissioned because we were looking specifically at what we might be able to do in Beacon Park. We had a look at unashamedly revenue generating activities, given the comment I've just made about our sport and leisure budgets and the pressure that they're currently under. And we had a look at popular and growing activities. And without wishing to get 2,000 different priorities, we had to put them into some categories, and that's kind of what we did. If I could just, for everybody's benefit, if I may as well, Chair, I understand why people are mentioning 400,000 as the budget. The budget for paddle is 300,000. The 100,000 additional is being spent on the tennis courts in Burntwood and places like that as well. So it's £300,000 that we're talking about, not 400,000. Sources, I've just spoken to Michael as well. We do have sources. We will circulate all of the sources for all of the data that has been used in the paper at the end of the meeting, if that's okay.
It'd be useful to get any UK sort. I mean, it's early days, but if there's any UK examples where it's working, because you know what works here may not work elsewhere. So that would be useful if there is any that you've got there. There's a feasibility study and that sort of thing. That was a theory. Claire, Councillor Buckhurst. Feasibility study, you not think of that one, or find us the question right?
Well, other than research that we did into the different types of sports activities that, as I say, might be popular, might be growing across the country and might generate revenue, we did that piece of work. We didn't do a feasibility study in great detail, no, not about paddle specifically.
And the diversification, I think, as well, that was there as well. So
yeah, I think to your point, Councillor Booker, I think we've answered that in an earlier question as well. I mean, the perception on this side of the table anyway is that paddle tennis is the growth of tennis, so it's a part of the tennis sport. If that makes sense. You can tell I'm clearly in my comfort zone when I'm talking about sports.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Miles is next, then Colin, then Dave, and please, we need to get on to the other important document.
Thank you, Chair.
Never thinking of questions afterwards. You know, you should have thought of these things before we start. Is my view. Miles.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about young people and whether they would want this. I noticed in the stats we've been given in the survey, there were actually 1,417 respondees, but only 9 were under 18 and only 16 were under 24. So I just wondered if you could speak briefly to consultation or research on how paddle tennis is the take up with particularly with younger people, obviously focusing on concerns about obesity among young people in the community. You want to have some confidence that this would have good uptake in that demographic. And I suppose lastly, on the theme of the night, Lichfield District Youth Council, you know, were they consulted on this point to get a young people's take on it?
If it existed at that time. Okay. Well, that's another question.
Perhaps that's a useful time to point out that this, of course, has been to scrutiny, or has overview and scrutiny have at least had the opportunity to review this paper.
Well, council and scrutiny.
Council and scrutiny. Now I understand that we are a new council, as it were, and we have had an election since then. So there may be some members who haven't seen it before and fully understand that. Equally, there are some members who have seen it before and have voted for it before. So this is a second iteration of it, as it were. And this started, I think, originally came to ONS in February 2023 and to council in 2023, which may have preceded the youth council. I'm just padding until Michael comes in.
Yeah, just to reference the popularity. So 30% of women play paddle, which is typically in tennis, you normally get about a 15% uptake in women. So there's a significantly higher uptake in females within sport. That being said, it is very popular across all the age groups. And I think probably the key point would be that we have got a district where sort of 38% of people aren't active. And I don't think that figure's dramatically changed in the last few years with the traditional sports that are being offered. So, I mean, if we can diversify that, particularly for the young people within sport in general, you have a big dropout period from, say, sort of secondary school age to 18. And having sort of something new, something different and something exciting will certainly help increase participation in that age group as well.
I think perhaps just for clarification, I don't think 30% of women play paddle tennis. I think 30% of players are, just in case.
Yeah, good point. That I missed that myself. Actually, yeah.
Point of
Yes,
information.
sorry, yes,
I was
yeah.
actually at the youth council when the issue of paddle tennis came up, and the young people there were saying, paddle tennis, what's that about? There's one over near Derby. Those young people there weren't particularly keen on paddle tennis, but were keen on darts, because we just had that young man, the 16-year-old, get to the final of the World Darts Championship. They were also keen on pool, having access to pool tables, and darts and pool tables are only accessible in the main in pubs, which young people aren't allowed into. So I just want to flag that up again as something that really ought to be on the list. It's no detriment to paddle tennis and taking that forward. And as bowls have been mentioned, it's something that I've pushed before. I just think, there's opportunities, because the district council own a couple of the bowling greens in the district, and we could encourage better use of bowls as well. So please put that on the wish list.
Chair, just
I
for,
do want to get on, yeah.
yeah, sorry.
And I get going backwards, yeah.
Just to add to the clarity that has just been provided, I think Councillor Woodward was at Youth Council relatively recently where that conversation
Yeah.
came up. Whereas I think your question was, was the Youth Council engaged before the decision to introduce? So as I said, I didn't think it existed at that time, but you're quite right. It did come up recently on the agenda.
Yeah, Doug's been briefed, please.
Yeah, just to say that pools and darts will never feature on our active Lichfield agenda.
You have to
and
pick them up.
I'll
The ones I
categorically
use,
say
I
that
pick 'em
now.
up. Richard, then, but hurry up, please. Good grief, man. We briefed the leader.
Clarification on the youth council. It was an off the agenda discussion. The youngsters were not aware of the proposal because it wasn't researched to present to them. But I'm quite sure we can actually do that process.
Off the agenda, but I mean, anarchists have we got in this? Colin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking back at the survey again,
no.
Simon's rounded it up to 2,000. It was 1,400, which is 1 point. Which is 1.4% of the population. Now, the vast majority of those are in the over 45 age grade. So we're basing an investment of £300,000 on a survey that reached 1.4% of the population, the vast majority of which were over 45 in age. And I just wonder how many of those people play paddle tennis, even know about it. And I'm concerned not just about the capital investment, but the revenue risk. And Councillor Pullen's mentioned about it being discussed at the last council. I don't remember any specific mention of paddle tennis being discussed at overview and scrutiny on the last iteration of this. We did discuss the shameful use of a vast amount of Section 106 money on revenue generating activities for the council rather than investing it in an expansion of GP services, which I was very much against. I would support the investment in GP services, not in the revenue generating activities for the council. I don't remember any reference to paddle tennis. Paddle tennis isn't mentioned at all in this survey, although except what Michael said, it's part of the tennis genre. But even if you look at that, that score's quite low in terms of all the people who have responded to the survey. So I just worry about the amount of capital investment, but more importantly, the revenue risk. And I'm hoping when we do this survey into the business case we look more closely at areas where it's not been successful in this country, rather than simply look at good news stories, because I've heard of some instances where paddle tennis courts are closing down now because there's not been enough use of them. So I think we do need to look at this in an open-eyed way, please.
Paddle tennis has been to the scrutiny committee and full council a few weeks after. I know, even if it's spelt with 2 Ds and 2 Ls, as I said. Did you want to come back on the closure of paddle tennis courts as well as the other bit?
Yeah,
You're
sorry.
a bit shocked out there.
No, I was just going to add quickly on the closure of some of them. Those often have a lot of barriers, so that where the specific facilities as to where those courts are that are closing down have barriers. So, for example, some of them are in existing traditional tennis clubs where you will need to be a member of said tennis club to then even know that facility existed. Hence the popularity. Hence that facility isn't as well advertised as it should be. Obviously, the whole point of us trying to put this facility in the park is that it will have a lot of interest, and it won't have those barriers in place for the people within the district.
Well, thanks. I remember playing tennis court with somebody at Centre Parks, and you spend more time picking the ball up once it's gone one way than on edge with paddle tennis. You've got the walls there, and so they think, oh yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Well, that's successful. Dave Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I can go back a little bit, you were saying that part of the reason for introducing paddle tennis is about inactivity and about trying to get people to be more active. I must say I've got significant concerns about whether introducing such a novel sport as this, which is so active as this, which it's not one of the lighter touch active activities that can get people back into those good habits. So I do have some concerns about whether such a novel sport is a particularly useful driver on that front. But the main reason I want to raise this is I'm currently on the social progress index for Lichfield. We don't have ward level data for inactivity. We've only got a district wide figure. And what we do have is two which can kind of point towards that. So first and foremost, there's coronary heart disease mortality rate and then obesity in year 6 pupils. On both of those measures, of the bottom, sorry, I'll take coronary heart disease, for instance, of the 7 wards, the 1/3 of wards with the highest rates of coronary heart disease, only one of them is in the city. And similarly, with obesity in year 6 pupils, of the 16 wards where we have data for that, of the 1/3 of wards, so the 1/3 of wards which have the highest levels of obesity amongst year 6 pupils, only one of them is in the city. So there is a question that I think that's something that we do need to respond to, is making sure that if we are introducing this facility with a specific aim of getting people more active and driving that activity and hopefully bringing both those rates of obesity in year 6 pupils and coronary heart disease mortality rate down, is citing it in Lichfield the most appropriate venue in order to deliver the outcomes that we're seeking?
I think perhaps if I can take that first point about the location of it, I think in the real world, people don't live their lives by which local authority ward they live in, and people move around the city and even the district quite freely, particularly a small-ish city like Lichfield. But equally in Burntwood, we're investing money into Burntwood to improve the facilities there as well. So I understand that we do have that ward level data for a number of the data points, which is really helpful to us all, and I'm glad we're able to access that data now. But equally, I don't think what we should be doing is going out to every single ward and making different.
I'd like to move on really, because we're moving on paddle tennis. I think seems to me.
Just
Paul,
to
you want to come at the end.
I just want to sort of, can I just sort of make a summary point, Chair, which is there's been a full debate. There's no in principle objection to paddle tennis around this table. There's no objection at all to spending 300,000 on sports infrastructure, but there are some reservations, and there are specific points that are being brought up about financial projections, alignment with the policy, the sources, and Chair, could I, as a committee, could I recommend that we say that this goes back to Cabinet and is reconsidered as a decision? Yeah. Because there are clearly reservations that have been raised by this committee, and so otherwise,
I need to help. Need to help me. What are the reservations that this committee has that you think?
Well, yes. Well, I've just listened. So there's been a full debate, isn't there? But alignment to the sports policy and or strategy of this council, the information we provided lacks financial projections and sources. So we need to make sure that decision is going to be made on sound grounds. Now there's been a full discussion here. Is that it? But I'm saying that full discussion needs to continue through to Cabinet so that the decision can be fully considered and a proper decision made before we go ahead with the spend.
So
just in terms of a point of order, if you like, that decision has gone through cabinet already. There's on the forward plan, as I said, installation of paddle tennis courts at Burnwood Leisure Centre, which may have been subject to calling had it been a correct decision. That's not the case. The prompt for this particular briefing was because of concerns about the siting of a paddle court tennis in Beacon Park. So the decision's already been made, and we've already scrutinised things like budget and finances. So I'm not sure, Paul, I'm sorry to say that there's a way of delaying the decision further while it's reconsidered by Cabinet.
But Chair, so through that's what I'd like to be, because and so this isn't about the location, that's planning. This is about the concept of whether this is the right sport to bring
But
forward.
there was there was discussion in February. There was discussion at the Flexible Council. Neither of those two meetings you were at, by the way, in February last year. So I mean, it's not. It's not helpful.
That's not particularly helpful point. In trying to be constructive.
Well, it is because
we're trying to be constructive.
we have a
But what
duty
we
to actually.
what we know is this. Fine. This has been on a journey through the council, but now we are at a point, where we're talking about expenditure. Shouldn't we, as a committee, with the reservations that are being raised, then say that decision needs to be reviewed?
Well,
otherwise, what's the purpose?
What's the
purpose? What's the point of this discussion?
Let me answer. The information is going to be sent to us, but the chief executive is going to respond anyway.
Well, no, Chair, the only point I was going to make is the decision to use the money for these purposes has been made by full council and been through cabinet previously. As you say, Chair, the opportunity for scrutiny to scrutinise it has come and gone, and it has been scrutinised through that process. Today, my understanding that today we had a series of questions that you asked us to answer. We've done our level best to do that, but I didn't understand that this was about reopening the decision. The decision has been taken.
I mean, we can't, it's just, So, I mean, the comments have been made, the cabinet leader, chief executive have heard them, and we're going to be getting some reports back. And certainly the test will be how successful it is, and that can certainly come back to scrutiny and be scrutinised. But the horse is gone, really.
The money hasn't been spent.
Well, you could say that about all, I'm not sure that's I'd like to move on there, but
This discussion was prompted because of the siting of the paddle tennis court, and the paddle tennis as a policy principle has already been decided by full council, whether we like that or not. But it was specifically about the planning application and the site. So there were lots of questions that arose from that, which I think have been answered tonight. So sorry, Paul, but you asked for this item to be here, but it has been, the decisions have been made and can't be reversed now. Though I do hope that the leadership team will take on board some of the comments that have been made.
you can't call something in that was over a year ago. So, I mean, I've tried our best. I'm grateful for the officers, I'm grateful for the leader as well for answering the questions that we put. And we still have time for one more item, I think, or two more items. So thank you for that. The next item is, in fact, the work programme, item number 11. And the problem with the work programme, it suddenly ends, you see, it finishes, where I think next year we'll have some sort of continuation, because I have the forward plan here, 17 pages, 8 items of the MTFS, which will come to this committee over the next 12 months. And there's other, possibly 12 items, at least just from the forward plan to look at. So, I mean, just the way we can just deal with the work plan in future is that perhaps have another meeting then and asking for ideas. But it's based on the forward plan partly, so we're ahead of the cabinet, if you like. But then there's other items as well that we'll bring on. Plus the task groups. Now, I was 1 or 2 task groups are coming to an end. I'd like the climate change task group to come to an end, so there'll be a report back here. But I still like to see the dashboard on the website. Some real activities, not have to wait till September before we get any real action. But I'm glad there is some real progress that has been made in recent months. And other task groups will come and go. One on the buses that was being asked for. We have been in contact with the county council, and finally we've got a confirmation that the county council's Prosperous Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be undertaking a work programme planning session for the 24-25 municipal year at their meeting in May, following which they'll know more about what they want to do in the coming year. Apparently, the last item was considered by the Staffordshire Bus Strategy at the meeting in July 2023. And I've read those papers, but they said that they would be willing to have an officer here to actually as a witness on the bus strategy and so on. So we're still working on that. We're just working with the county council to actually get something that's realistic and practical and progress from there, really. So I'm just letting you know that is a situation. I haven't forgotten it. Do my best with the county. As you know, buses are not even a county responsibility, really, except for the funding of some services. Any questions on the work programme at all? If not, I'd like to move on to the last item, which is not what?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Dave. Sorry.
It's the one thing I actually mentioned in the pre-meeting as well. Just
you did. I'm sorry. Yes, you did. Yeah,
that's all right.
I beg your pardon.
It's been a long evening, Steve. I shouldn't worry. Yeah, just to put on record, I think it would be really beneficial actually looking at two of the budgets that we set aside as part of the MTFS at February Council. The Burntwood Blueprint budget and the Heritage Proposal budget. I think both of those are somewhere where we are potentially putting in seed money as a district council in order to try and attract additional investment and external investment into the district. And I think that would be something that would be really benefited by having some member overview and insight. So I think task groups on those, when capacity becomes available, depending on when different groups finish, etc., would be very, very, very valuable.
Okay. Anybody else? No. Next item then. Now, there's part of this is confidential, so that's, I believe, the appendices in the main. Is that right? Appendix A, B, and C. So please don't refer to that if you can in part two, because we like to have as much in part one as we can in public. So agenda item 12, which is the securing an anchor food and beverage tenant for the cinema complex. Anybody going to volunteer to? Must be somebody there. I mean, they're holding back there. And you'll see the recommendations there. It's quite a big recommendation. I know it's a big item because it's big money involved. But did you want to introduce it at all? Is that the best thing? Well, I've got people ready to ask questions.
I think, yeah, I'm not going to do it to death because I'm conscious of
bearing in mind the confidential bit, which we're
yeah, exactly. I think for me, this is an opportunity for us to invest in an anchor tenant, as the paper so helpfully points out. And the benefit of this is not just to us as a landlord in terms of not only the direct rental yield, but also the halo effect that it then has on not only on values per square foot in the immediate vicinity, which clearly we have a lot of skin in the game on, but also the task that we as an LLP now have is not just to fill all of the other units over the coming 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years, but to ensure the longevity of that site for the coming 25 years. And just as we had on the Friarsgate site or the Friarsgate development, a really solid anchor tenant. And I think that's a sort of fairly well understood concept that you get a well-known brand anchor tenant. They expect a certain amount of rent-free and certain amount of fit-out costs, etc. In return for that, the benefit to the landlord is that a whole load of other brands immediately swarm and follow, and that helps to keep you full, or at least to keep your void rates down over the lifetime of that tenancy. So whilst I know in some areas it's been portrayed as a sort of an additional cost to the council to bring the cinema, actually I see it almost entirely in reverse, that actually it's incumbent on us as an LLP to ensure that we fill the rest of the site and even, you know, and keep that vibrancy, not just on the units we own, but beyond as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll invite questions then, really, which is the first one is from Leona, and the second, I've got you down now. What? Oh, yes, in confidential. All right. Yeah. Okay.
We're going to questions. We've got about 8 minutes.
No, I know we are. It's okay. 8 minutes is a long time for me. Don't worry.
Okay.
Councillor Phil Whitehouse, first question. As long as he's in part one.
Well, it may even breach part 1 and 2, but certainly in part 1 is I'm just wondering what the effect on the other tenants might be when they see this deal going through in this way. Will it affect our relationship in any way with any of the other F&B people that we're bringing in? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give the political answer, and Simon can give you the fact, or Anthony might give you the factual. I think the reality is that there might be some feeling of, well, hang on, why are you paying for? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? I think the brand that we're looking to bring in operates at a sufficient level that is the sort of the market expectation. Appreciate sometimes that doesn't sit well with some organisation, but that is how that sort of market operates. We're clearly have a very good relationship with Evolve, who have advised on various different elements of this, and that's certainly just the way the market operates at that end of the market. Would be my take. So,
thank you, Chair. Very little to add other than to say the fit out. Sorry, the LLP will undertake the fit out for all of the units within this. So there's a certain amount of investment by the LLP in all of the prospective tenants as well. Other tenants will get smaller amounts of incentivization to come in as well, but all of that other additional money is encapsulated within the existing budget. For the reason this is come as a separate issue is because this is an additional amount of money that we're requesting. And to the leader's point as well, the market knows and understands that this game, as it were, very, very carefully, very clearly as well. Some brands, like the brand that we're talking about for this particular item, are very used to attracting, and they won't do business unless they can attract the type of capital investment we're talking about. Other brands want to be part of any complex that has got those big name brands with them as well. So that in itself will be enough of an incentive. I hope that makes sense, Chair, in terms of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, it does to me. So theory, it should to everybody. I'm going to, is it part one? I was going to move the extension of the standing. I'd like to move the extension of the standing order with regard to time. That's the only standing order for 15 minutes maximum, right? If that's okay. Is that agreed? That's second. Is that agreed? Thank you. Then if you've got a question, then I'll move into.
Yeah, I've got a question on part 1, but
yeah,
I've also
we did that one. Then
I've got a question on part 2 later. But
yeah, no, that's fine.
Well, 2 questions of part 1. Just looking at it from the outside, I mean, I've had various people talk to me about this, and I understand the reasoning and the discussions, and I've been party to them all the way through. But how it looks from the outside is that once we knock down one problem, another one arises. Then we knock down that, will another one arise? And I think what several people have said to me as I walk about, people approach me, does the council know what it's doing? I believe we have discussed this and made good, sensible discussions and decisions on the way through. But I'm just looking at it, how it looks to the outside world who have not been party to those discussions, that we pay a sum of money to get the cinema involved, and then, oh, now we've got to pay another sum of money to get this other group involved, but we have to pay another sum of money to get another group involved, and so on and so forth. So that's the worry. That's the general thing. That the second specific question is on 1.2, that we're going to find the 1.7 million from the sale of the Ford garage site, the ex-Ford garage site. But if we don't, we're going to find it through making savings in our budget. And I just wonder how that's going to work, because we know how tight the budget is at the moment. And I'm just skeptical whether that's realizable if we can't generate that kind of money from the sale of that site. But what's the risk on the rest of the council's budget?
2 minutes and then I'll.
Right. Really quickly then, in terms of, does the council know what it's doing? I think the transparency is really important in democracy, but also clearly, as you were about to move into confidential, some things are kept confidential and become public in due course. I think this is one of them. We knew, and in fact, in the paper that went to full council, we flagged up there that every man required one of a specific selection of tenants to be open and ready to coincide with them opening. This is, you know, this very much accords with that, with the process. I think naturally in any commercial negotiations, things are going to move, and sometimes the public find out about that early on up front, and other times it comes out subsequently in negotiations. I think that's just the reality of the commerciality of this agreement that we're entering into. The second question around the 1.7, I think, and perhaps Anthony might want to speak to this a little bit more, but there are a range of options. I think that is what that is saying to us is there are some options for us to fund it. If you don't want to take the first 1.7 out of that capital receipt, then you're going to have to go and find it from somewhere else, which is what Anthony usually says to me when we want to spend money, where you're going to go and find it from. So I think what that's saying is not constraining the council and saying you must take that, but it is highlighting the fact that if we choose not to, clearly we're going to have to go and find that somewhere else. And I've got a fairly firm view about where it should come from.
We're not going to spend quarter an hour looking at somewhere else, are we? Really? But you make that. If you can be brief, Anthony, just because.
So I was just going to.
Sorry, thank you.
So about the first point, Councillor.
Say more later, of course.
Sorry, the Councillor Ball made, and just to add to what the leader said, one of the recommendations that were approved previously was that there's a delegation to the leader and the chief exec to enter into any contracts necessary to deliver the food and beverage and the cinema, as long as they're within approved budgets. And that's an important control that we've built into the process, so that in the event that discussions, negotiations take a course of action that necessitates budget increases, those can't be taken without coming back through these various governance bodies. So that's Overview and Scrutiny, Cabinet and Council. So there is the transparency and the governance and scrutiny around those decisions before the decision is made. So but I think that's quite an important part of this, to involve the rest of the council in that decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'd like to move into the exclude. Is it brief? Yeah, pause. Sorry.
But yeah, just to make,
no, thank you.
Yeah, the point that Doug was just making about full council when we voted on the buyout, I have a bit of disappointment that there wasn't full clarity on there was this term in the lease. I don't think that was made as clear as I would have liked it in the papers that came to that full council. But focusing on the 1.7, if this is maybe this is going to be a stellar opportunity with this operator, but my question is it worth 1.7 million pounds? And what my question and my specific question back is that there are obviously other operators that that Everyman has as a selected preferred providers. What discussions have been had with them, and specifically, are there other operators amongst that list that would come to Lichfield, would take on this premises for less than that cost?
So one of the key factors in the decision here is that I, as the Section 151, and you as members have got to ensure that this is best value for the council. Now, to your point, we haven't gone out to those other 7 on the list, but we've done 2 things to give the council and myself the necessary assurance. We've gone to the valuers we've been using throughout this project and said to us, we need an assurance statement here that this is a market compliant deal. It's the type of deal that would be done in the market by the private sector operator in a similar position. And that's for 2 reasons. One is the best value argument, but secondly, to make sure that we're not breaching any subsidy control rules around this. And that's the advice we've had from our lawyers, that we need to get that. The second piece of information we've asked for, and this will enable the valuer in part to complete this, is we've got an economist to look at the benefit cost ratio and the benefits this particular operator brings to the economy. So they've looked at construction cost, the jobs, employment forecast, increases in gross value added, etc., and the wider impact, not just within the vicinity, but as you move away from the. So all of those type of things, we will hopefully we'll have in time to make the decision. But we've had an initial one, and we've gone back now to ask for if we're able to provide comparatives to that, to give you the assurance you need that this isn't necessarily a non-best value decision.
Okay, thank you.
But I was going to say, I know, Anthony, it's not your decision, but that you've said that we haven't properly due diligence the other options. There might be another option which could work here in this district, which might be £1 million less than we are being prepared to pay. So, I just don't understand why we haven't done that and haven't done that full due diligence process, considering we are looking at spending a lot of our residents' money on this potential opportunity.
Chair, I can't add a great deal to what Anthony's already said, other than to say that our partner in this LLP, who we brought on and we agreed to go into partnership with specifically because of their commercial capabilities that we do not have as an organisation, is currently negotiating with multiple organisations about each of the units as well. Their advice to us is, for the reasons that we set out in this paper, the best attraction for that particular site at the top of the complex is the organisation that we're recommending to you as well. We chose them as our partner because they give that add value to us. They help us to make those informed decisions with their understanding of the market, the attractiveness of our site and that type of thing as well. Their recommendation, which is why we're bringing it forward for conversation tonight, is the organisation that we've talked about. They have talked to other organisations, as I say, and to the point about clarity at full council, negotiations by their very nature pivot. They take some time to go back and forth as well. We went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with the cinema, 2 or 3 cinema operators as well. There has been no attempt whatsoever to conceal any information, but by their very nature of them, negotiations change. When I can give you a full picture of all of the negotiations that have been concluded, I will absolutely do that. But it is a moving feast. Thank you, Chair.
So briefly then, did you want to come?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. £1.7 million, that's a huge slab of money again. So I'm very conscious of that particular figure and the fact that it's, it's again going into Lichfield City rather than the wider district. But I am convinced of the additional gross value added that Anthony just referred to, because I think it will give opportunities for employment and so on across the whole district. So, I understand that. I just want to go back briefly.
Can I just say, I've only got 7 minutes left,
Yeah,
and there's
want to go back
anything
to-
in part 2, I'll
yeah,
have no time to do it.
To
so.
Colin Ball's point, please, if I may, Chairman, about the 3.18, several options to fund this budgetary shortfall or borrowing need. So it is the reduction in investments or external borrowing. The likelihood for that is high compared to other likelihoods being low or medium. So that looks as though that's going to be the way forward. So what consideration, it may not be possible to answer now, but what consideration has been given to those reductions in investments that I don't think our residents will particularly be keen on reducing services, but if some indication can be given about those, I'd be grateful. Thanks, Chair.
So what we're talking about here is internally borrowing to fund this 1.7 million. And what effectively that means is that we place less more money out on the money market in one form or another. And that has 3 key benefits to the council. So it won't impact on the services we deliver. It's basically money that we're holding in the bank, either for a rainy day or for a project in the future. But it means it's actually less risky for the residents because you're not putting money out on the money market, so there's not the risk of it going bankrupt. It tends to be lower cost because external borrowing tends to be a higher cost normally. And this is the big one for me, is if the council gets windfall income from one form or other, you can repay it without any penalty. So if we went and borrowed 1.7 million from PWLB for 25 years or 15, we got £1 million because a finance settlement was better than we anticipated, or it was delayed, or we don't have any type of reform, the choice the council can make is we'll repay that, and we will then be in a position where we've got no borrowing costs to fund on this facility, and all the income we take goes straight into the base budget. To me, that's a better position to be in than having 1.7 of external borrowing in place. The optimum would be to use a capital receipt, because you wouldn't even need to internally borrow in that situation. But, that will be a decision for Cabinet and full council.
Can I ask, has anyone got any questions that I need to ask in part 2? In confidential? Well, you haven't got very long, because, you know, I move that the exclusion of the press and public, resolve that as publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which would involve the likely disclosure of exempt